there are any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Rebecca Breese, and substituting is Councillor Phil Bignell. There have been some changes to the political balance of the committee. Councillor Christine Ware has joined the committee for the Liberal Democrats. Thank you very much.
Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Do any of the members of the committee have any declarations of interest in any of the items under consideration at this meeting? Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 7, I've already declared my intent or view on that. I'll withdraw from voting and being a part of the, but I will speak as a ward member instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other interests?
Chair. Thank you. Item 9 is in my ward, but I've kept away from it.
Okay,
So
thank you very much.
Okay for that.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes. Do we confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 18th of November 2025 as a correct record? Yes? Okay, thank you. Item 4, Chair's announcements. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting, subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure may address the committee. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussions on any item. Anybody who repeatedly disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave. All speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their statement, except where Chair's discretion has been applied, and are asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer any questions the committee may have. This meeting is being webcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, when speaking, please speak clearly and concisely into the microphone at all times. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by Democratic Services. Please ensure that all devices are switched off or on silent mode. For the benefit of the public watching remotely, I will now introduce the top table, starting on my furthest right.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Sian Webb, Principal Lawyer of Planning and Highways. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Woods, Democratic Services Officer for the Council.
Councillor John East, Chair.
Nathan Lau, Team Leader within Development Management for the South area.
Eamon McDowell, I'm the Team Leader for the North area.
Thank you. My name is Bob Ham. I'm the Case Officer for the first application on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Okay, item 5, proposed pre-committee site visits. There are no proposed pre-committee site visits ahead of the next meeting on the 8th of January. Item 6, Rye Hill Lodge, Norton Junction, Long Buckby. I will now hand over to Case Officer Bob Ham to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. This application is for a detached timber building to house 3 stables and associated tack room, etc., within a private paddock adjacent to a dwelling with the open countryside. Thank you. It's in a position to the west of Long Buckby Village and northwest of Long Buckby Wharf. There are the house occupied by the applicant, Rye Hill Lodge, is just to the left or the southwest of the application site for the paddock, and there's one other building, one other dwelling, Rye Hill Barns, to the west of that or the left of it on the plan. The site is in that strip of land between the A5 Trunk Road, which is the line going down the left-hand side of the picture, and on the right-hand side we have the West Coast Main Line and the M1. And the access to the site crosses from the A5 past the various buildings across the M1 and off into open countryside beyond. The proposal has been called in on the grounds of overdevelopment and loss of visual amenity. And there's a detailed third-party objection which is referenced in the main report. The proposed timber building is positioned to the east of the applicant's dwelling, and it'll be sited within a paddock and 5 metres behind and parallel to the fence which demarcates the boundary with the track. And the blank elevation of the building would face the track. The elevation that faces northwards into the site has openings, roof lights and windows for the 3-number stables. Can we look at the plans, please, Eamon? Yep, this is the actual building here. It's what's termed an American barn, which means the entrances are in either gable end with a central corridor. You've got the 3 stable bays at the top of the drawing on the side, which faces up towards the paddock, and then you've got the other accommodation, tack room and office on the south side. So there, all of the visual interest, as it were, is on the side facing away from the track. The track is not part of the adopted highway. It's accessed from the A5. It is, however, part of a public bridleway, EY1, which starts at the A5. You can see in the picture here, just beyond the gates to the various buildings, and it passes between the existing buildings, past the site, and then extends through open countryside and eventually links up with the public highway network much further east at Long Buckby. This photograph here is taken from near the entrance, but looking 180 degrees away from the last picture, away from the A5 and upwards towards the buildings. The application site is at the top of the hill there. This is closer up. The buildings to the left, that is the applicant's house, Rye Hill Lodge, and the garage there too. The application site, the paddock, is just at the top of that picture. Here's a closer view of it. The large vehicle in there is a large horse box, and you can see the boundary front in the bridleway, and a farm gate a bit further up, which is currently used as access and will continue to be used as access to the paddock should the building be approved. The proposed building will be manufactured off-site. It's a fairly standard thing. It would measure 12.84 metres long and 10.3 metres wide. Dual pitch to the ridge, which will be 3.73 metres high, and an eaves height of 2.25 metres. The building will be clad in timber, horizontal timber cladding, and black corrugated plastic roofing material. There will also be a hard surface area just alongside the northern wall of the building, extended 3 metres beyond that. And the red line application for the proposed equestrian building is drawn quite tightly around the building, measuring about 45 metres by 25 metres. There's a much larger open field or paddock to the north and west, which currently contains a small 2-bay timber field shelter. That again is, this is walking up the bridleway just beyond the application site, away from the A5, and looking back up the application site, it's the building beyond the tree. We can just see the existing timber shelter on the right of the picture, and the horse box, which was parked up that day, on the left. Next picture, please, Eamon. And this again is looking back down the bridleway or the access track, which carries on down the slope and eventually joins the A5. Next picture, please. Turning again, sort of round to the left, there's a large hard serviced area, which I believe is for exercise and horses, on the other side of the track there. Sort of much beyond this, the bridleway is gated and becomes less definite, and sort of passes on into open countryside, crosses the railway and the M1, and I say eventually ends up in Long Buckby. Yes, please. Yeah. Okay. The character of the immediate landscape becomes more rural at this point. but there still existing buildings and man-made features visible on either side of the bridleway. Despite the land here being at a relative high point, you can see on the picture it sort of plateaus out from the incline up from the A5. There's relatively limited opportunities for views out to the wider landscape beyond, particularly during summer months when the surrounding trees and vegetation are in leaf. On balance, the proposed development is considered acceptable in planning terms without having an undue adverse impact on the character and appearance of the local landscape. Whilst being larger than the existing field shelter nearby, it is of a scale of appearance which is not considered to detract unacceptably from the open countryside or from the ambience of the public bridleway that passes by at that point. There are no identified highway safety, residential amenity, flood risk or animal waste issues identified that cannot be addressed by the use of appropriate planning conditions as are in the report and have been recommended by consultees. Therefore, this recommendation is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point now, I'd like to invite the committee to ask any questions of the officers. Are there any questions? Councillor Ware.
Thank you. I note that in the relevant planning history, there is E 2025-0493, allegation of vehicles parking on and blocking the use of the public bridleway. At the time of the report being written, it was still under consideration. Is there any update on this, please?
There is no update. I have checked with enforcement colleagues and that one is still under investigation.
Any further questions? No? Okay. So now following that, we will now move on to the... sorry? Oh, Councillor Bignell, sorry.
You want to put the question time now?
Yes. No, sorry. I was going to speakers.
Speakers?
Yeah.
Can I play for challenge, please? You said
Mic
for
on.
3 minutes at the September meeting. It was agreed by full council that both non-strategic and strategic would be 5 minutes. The constitution has not been updated, but the motion was proposed and accepted at the meeting in September. It should be 5 minutes.
In light of there being no, through you, Chair, no updates to the Constitution, we have to go with what's written.
Okay. So we now move to public speakers in the following order. Sebastian Charles, on behalf of the local residents.
Thank you. My name's Sebastian Charles. I'm a solicitor and legal associate of the Royal Town Planning Institute with 30 years' experience. I act for Fiona Cole, who lives below the site in Rye Hill Barn and who also operates the livery yard on the other side of the bridleway. But I'm also speaking on behalf of all the bridleway users. This application should never have been validated like this and certainly shouldn't be being presented to you for a decision this evening. It fails to include fundamental details which you need to be able to decide whether it's acceptable or not. There are serious deficiencies, meaning you can't possibly grant consent for what is before you this evening. The principle of appropriate equestrian facilities in a rural countryside location is understood, but there are potential serious consequences from equestrian development not done right, and this is very much one of those not being done right. As you will appreciate if you visited the site, which I have, the site slopes downwards towards the applicant's house and my client's house, and also downwards to the public bridleway. It looks much steeper than it does in the photographs. The photographs are also misleading because the hard-surfaced turning and manoeuvring area is private to my client and not available to the applicant to use. It's not possible to erect this very large stable block without extensive excavation to make a flat platform to put it on, either by raising the ground up or by lowering it down. But whatever changes you make to the ground levels will affect the runoff from the roof and from the land. If that's not managed correctly, it could run down the bridleway, turning it into an unusable quagmire and creating an environmental risk. Those photographs with the horse box were taken on a dry day. If you were to go on a rainy day today, there's a lot of water in that area. You couldn't possibly drive the horse box into that field without it slipping in the mud. And a large building will require a large area of hard standing. The 3 metres proposed isn't all that's going to be needed. They haven't shown the hard standing that you need by the doors at either end of the building. And a large area of hard standing also creates a further water management issue. So nothing should have come before you till proper drainage, proper cut and fill drawings were prepared. The access arrangements are not safe and are potentially unlawful. You can't service this development by parking on the bridleway and unloading vehicles into the site. You can't pull vehicles off the road through the single access gate that's proposed directly abutting the bridleway. If proper measures for safe manoeuvring are not included, your 7.5-tonne Traws transporter could be reversing out onto the bridleway to the detriment of users. And highways seem to have failed to understand their role is about safety on the bridleway, not just on roads. If there was to be an accident involving an innocent user of the bridleway, that would be on your hands if you were to permit this. As a minimum, the decision should be to defer it until a proper scheme of access and all the other details required are put before you, but more correctly, it should be refused due to insufficient information about access, safety of bridleway and its users, the location, extent and materials proposed for hard standing, surface water drainage, ground engineering works, waste management, lighting and the scale.
Please conclude your statement.
Yeah. Some of these issues might be potentially solvable, but at the moment the application simply has to be refused because you can't possibly approve it based on what's in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now have a written statement by Ian McCord.
Thank you, Chair. This is the statement of Ian McCord. Chair and members, the more I've become aware of this application, the more I cannot believe what I'm seeing. The committee should be aware that many of the things stated in the officer's report are misleading, contradictory, contested and currently subject to valid complaints and ongoing enforcement investigation. From the outset, this application lacks fundamental information and answers what is arguably could be described as a purposeful omission of information. It lacks transparency and critical necessary details, as you would have seen from the objections. Some quick examples include: the claims development cannot be seen from the public land. These are false. The site can clearly be seen from the well-used bridleway. It asserts that surface water will be disposed of via an existing watercourse. That is false. No such watercourse exists. There is no credible plan for surface or waste sewerage and drainage or lighting despite the environmental hazards posed by equestrian waste. Additional information has been requested by Environmental Health. No topographical survey or safe access plan has been provided. These are basic fundamental requirements of such developments. Answers to the officer's further inquiries are evasive and incomplete. These omissions and inaccuracies undermine the integrity and credibility of the application, making it impossible to assess its true impact. Far from being a modest, stable block as allowed in policy, this is an extremely large building with a footprint the same as the applicant's house. It is clearly excessive for private use on a 5-acre paddock, and this proposal would introduce a dominant structure into a prominent position in open countryside, thus eroding the rural character and visual amenity enjoyed daily by the many users of the bridleway. Standing almost 4 metres high on the highest part of the surrounding landscape, it is not modest, sensitively sited or screened, stable development as required under rural equestrian design guidance. It has highly questionable ancillary labelling for areas that take up half the barn, with a red line site boundary concerningly over double the area of the proposed building. This application fails all 3 policy tests in policy RA6, namely justification, appropriate scale for the location and not causing significant adverse impact. The original application hints at a proposed menage. The officer has stated this wording has been removed, but it is still present on the current application drawings. Remember, even the smallest wording hiding in plain sight is approved if an application is approved. Access and safety are also a concern. The access point is not shown on the accompanying plan. The proposed entrance is potentially not lawful, directly onto the bridleway with no setback, and potentially contravening the Highways Act, endangering public safety. Permitted development rights were removed from this property for good reason, to protect the site and surroundings and prevent overdevelopment. By omitting fundamental issues of the operation, waste, effluents, lighting, and the application is fatally flawed. We cannot deal with it as an afterthought by way of a condition. Nor can we get any reassurance that such conditions will be enforced, given past performance. In summary, you are being asked to approve a house-sized barn on a relatively small-scale paddock on elevated ground, visible from surrounding countryside, on a public right-of-way, with unanswered access, safety and environmental concerns. The proposed conditions cannot remedy fundamental issues of scale, siting, environment, land levels or truthfulness. The committee does not have to accept mitigation by condition where the potential harm is fundamental, e.g. scale, landscape dominance and environment. You cannot lawfully grant approval for a use that risks environmental and safety matters and violates multiple environmental related laws. The proposal omits vital operational detail like the management of the lighting, liquid waste and manure heap. The manure heap is where the application should be put, and I ask you to refuse permission. And that concludes the statement of Ian McCord.
Thank you. I now call on Dan Lister on behalf of Long Buckby Parish Council and also as the ward councillor. As you get 10 minutes. 6 minutes.
6.
6 minutes.
Whether he wants to speak three and three or 6 is up to him.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the site before you today is a sensitive location besides a well-used public bridleway in open countryside. The proposal is for a substantial rural building that conflicts with the development plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Speaking as the ward councillor and on behalf of the parish council, which is objected due to environmental risk and drainage, access and public safety concerns, overdevelopment and potential intensification of use at this site. On access, the route is a bridleway, not a byway or vehicular lane. Walkers, riders, cyclists and animals have priority with only restricted vehicle access for neighbouring properties. Any new or intensified vehicle use raises concerns over public safety and the character of this well-used route. The building itself is substantial, not a modest stable block. It has the same footprint as the applicant's house with excessive height and a mass for a 5-acre paddock. It's set on elevated ground with great prominence in the countryside and from the bridleway. Although described as having no windows, it includes 3 full-height external stable doors, 3 large roof lights and 2 very large gable-end doors that will emit significant light from this prominent position. The application boundary extends significantly beyond the barn, not quite tight as the report states, raising questions about the future use or development. While the report says references to a proposed menage have been removed, the plan on the public portal still states there is a proposed menage there. If you approve this, you would also be approving the menage, which is unacceptable. The existing field shelter status is uncertain. The applicants added 2 more stables last week. If permitted, these should be conditioned for removal with restrictions on further buildings. On lighting, the private use element is irrelevant. Lighting is essential for safe horse care. Environmental Health has requested details which, as far as I know, have not been provided. These need to be addressed before determination. The proposal does not meet Policy RA6 requirements. This policy requires rural equestrian buildings to be justified, appropriate in scale, and without significant adverse impact. There is no compelling need. The barn matches a dwelling scale. A large proportion is ancillary space, making it not ancillary and implying potential change of use. The development is neither incidental nor proportionate to private use. The scheme is not modest, well sited and not well screened as required by local guidance and the National Planning Policy Framework. The planning history here is relevant. A previous stable application was refused because it included a 1-bed annex. The applicants have recently built a 2-bedroom annex and are applying for a 6th stable barn. Individually and cumulatively, this exceeds the previous refused application. Permitted development rights were removed for good reason. Cumulative impact on this sensitive site must be given significant weight. This location is highly visible from the bridleway, footpaths and the canal. Lowering the ground level as mitigation would require significant engineering works, altering the landscape with environmental impacts not yet assessed. Parking, hard standing and their landscape and drainage impacts remain unclear. The proposal includes lorry and vehicle access off the bridleway, wider than previously improved with no safe access plan. no specification of hard standing size or materials, no vehicle restrictions and no turning space calculations. These also must be defined before determinations. Highways guidance indicates these gates should be used for livestock only, not vehicles. These concerns also connect to significant environmental issues. Environmental Health has requested information on drainage, runoff, lighting and muck management. These are material considerations given the land and proximity of the bridleway. National policy requires conditions to be necessary, relevant, precise and enforceable. These current conditions do not meet this standard. The committee need not accept mitigation by condition where potential harm could be fundamental, such as environmental or safety concerns. Given the barn's scale and ancillary accommodation, there is a real risk of future commercial use. If members consider approval, equestrian use must be strictly conditioned for private purposes only. This is a complex proposal on a sensitive site. The planning impacts, access, landscape, amenity, environmental safeguards, policy and cumulative development are significant. In light of policy requirements, site circumstances and local experience, I'd urge members to consider refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much. I now call on Charlie Bixby, agent for the applicants.
He's joining us remotely, Chair. He's following the meeting on YouTube and
Okay.
will join the meeting when called, so he should appear shortly.
Okay.
Hello, John speaking.
Hello there. Is that Charlie Bixby?
Hi. That is, yes.
Okay. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Good evening, members. The proposed American-style barn is of a simple design, located adjacent the public rights-of-way and the client's own property on a large associated plot of land. The proposed use of materials are sympathetic to the proposed use and character of the countryside. Whilst the building will be visible from the main adjacent footpath, the proposed size, scale and overall impact of the building in its proposed use would not cause adverse harm to the wider rural countryside in terms of visual or landscape impact. The principle of equestrian development in this location is considered to be acceptable and the rural character will be preserved. The proposed scheme cannot be considered as overdevelopment given the proposed recreational use of the building and siting of the existing plot in consideration with the overall context of land. The description of development has been previously amended to remove all reference to a menage or any commercial use. We would be happy to agree to a condition to this effect. The proposal in front of you today is for recreational use only, to clarify. We agree with the conditions cited by the LPA and wish to continue to work proactively with the LPA. And to conclude, the proposal complies with both local and national planning policies, and we welcome the LPA's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Frost.
I don't know if you can hear me, but on the report explains you've got 5.37 acres and 3 horses. My question is, how many stables do you have currently? How much stabling do you have currently?
Currently, I believe it's fairly limited, hence the reason for the proposed barn building. I believe the client sort of rents a piece of land elsewhere or alongside what is on the land as existing. But as the sort of the photo showed from the officer report, that's as existing.
Chair, the reason my question is the British Horse Society recommends that horses should have between 1 and 1.5 acres of grazing land, and this barn that could hold on the surface sort of 20. There's not enough grazing land for the horses. Could you explain that?
So obviously, what's in front of you today is a free bay stable, and it's got an associated tack room and hay room and all the necessary needs for sort of the modern equestrian. It's for recreational use, so that the amount of horses are limited on site. It's the client's own recreational sort of use. There's no intention for sort of commercial. Obviously, that would require a complete separate application. So sort of to answer your question, I think sort of given sort of the recreational use, I think that sort of is an adequate size plot of land.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Cartwright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, earlier on in the picture, weren't we shown there's already some stabling there on the site?
Yes, I believe one of the photos does show that. I don't know if we're able to show that right now.
So there's already stables there, and we're going to put another 3 on there?
Yes, obviously it is the client's intention to effectively replace these. It hasn't actually sort of been conditioned. I don't believe there's no reference in the report, but the overall aim is obviously, yes, this would be sort of their modern facilities, and this is the intention to use the proposed building in front of you for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Bixby.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I'm asking the officers if there are any points they wish to come back on.
Just in reference to the last question from Councillor Cartwright, Chairman, the existing building is a field shelter, which is similar to a stable, not quite the same, but it's always been referred to by the applicant as a field shelter, which is what it says. It's more somewhere the horses can go in inclement weather. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily appropriate for long-term accommodation through all seasons. Thank you.
Okay. So at this point now, then we. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bignell.
Yes, just a quick question on the conditioning. I think if we were minded to accept this, I'd like to see a lot of conditions in terms of things like commercial use, no menage, the control of waste and lighting. I mean, is that a possibility that all these can be conditioned on this application? As a question before we get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Certainly, the conditions already include some of those requirements. Condition 3, a scheme for the storage, treatment, disposal of manure and soil equine bedding to be submitted and approved and implemented. Condition 4 similarly refers to the storage, treatment, disposal of surface water and foul water, including sewage. Condition 5, floor levels. Condition 6, no external lighting to be installed and or attached with unless details have been submitted and approved. So it's, yeah, but the Menage is not part of the application. It did appear on some of the earlier schemes, and I queried that with the applicant, who said it was a mistake and took it off. The latest version of the drawings, which are cited in condition 2, there's no mention of a Menage. That can be added if needs be, but it shouldn't be necessary.
The speaker we just listened to said he'd be happy for the Menage to be conditioned in his non-existence, if I heard it right.
Again, through you, Chairman, the Menage doesn't form part of the current application. Its development in itself, it would require permission, and should the applicant wish to pursue that, that would be the subject of a future application. I don't think it would be reasonable or necessary to impose a condition that says you can't have other forms of development. That would be a matter of coming forward. The same reason why permitted development rights were removed from the dwelling was to enable the local planning authority to have control over any future alterations or extensions of that dwelling. But my advice, and again, I'll bow to legal, but I don't think you can impose a condition that says you can't have a Menage in the future.
It's just that the documentation still on the website still has Menage in the title. It's a site plans, the latest one. I've just pulled up a copy, and it does say SLP block plan stables and proposed Menage. So I think there's concerns there. Obviously, that makes it legally binding if it gets approved.
Again, I don't have the website before me. The description set out in the report doesn't make reference to the Menage. Again, you're the planning committee, so you can make clear what you want.
Yeah.
You can go for conditions. You can go for refusal. It's up to yourselves. But if you go for refusal, it'll be subject to an appeal. If you go for conditions, again, if they're judged to be inappropriate or don't meet the tests, then the applicants have the right to appeal the imposition or seek to vary those conditions in due course.
Okay.
I'm not sure it would make it illegal.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Just on these conditions, can drainage be legally conditioned?
Again, through you, Chairman, if members, the surface water drainage is subject to condition as a result of the representations received. That's been recommended by officers. We are satisfied that it meets the tests in terms of dealing with planning issues. So in that sense, we're content with the imposition of that condition.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Well, I believe there are other applications in for sites that are deferred until their drainage is sorted out. So I'm not sure why some it's okay to go forward with conditions and others have to have the drainage plan in place before they can be approved.
Again, through you, Chairman, each application on its own individual merits. This is basically a building in a field. Officers are satisfied that the means for dealing with surface water drainage can be dealt with by condition. If members, having heard the representations tonight, feel they haven't got that information before them to determine the application, then again, it's entirely up to you to give weight to those representations. But as officers, we think that the conditions meet the relevant tests in terms of their imposition. But again, it's over to yourselves if you disagree with that.
Okay, thanks. I think that'll have to go through the debate then, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Rainbird.
Sorry. With regard to the the two stables, or I can't remember what you referred to as a shelter of some kind. Is there a possibility that we can get a condition saying that if this has gone through as an approved, that this outhouse or shelter shall be removed?
Again, you're the planning committee, so if you want to come up with that, my view on field shelters, and there's case law on that, some of them don't actually require planning permission because they rest on the land. I don't know the details of this particular field shelter, but if it rests on the land, it's not development. I wouldn't require planning permission. But again, if you think, having heard the representations this evening, you want to impose conditions or want to come to another decision on the application, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ware.
Hello. I do have concerns about the field shelter. It's not for us, for people to tell people how to look after their horses. And a field shelter is a very different use to a stable block. the two things are different and could be required equally by somebody who has horses in that area.
Okay. Are there any further questions at this point? No? Okay, we can now move to debating. Who would like to make a start? Councillor Minikali.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think having to listen to all the speakers and the officers, there's a lot at stake here. I mean, like, you know, if we're talking about legalisation, we're talking about things that are not being done, not being met properly. So I'm not really sure. I'm sort of debating in terms of whether to defer it and get all these things fixed and bring it back to us in front of us, or completely refuse it.
Okay. Councillor Cartwright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm also, you know, it's countryside stuff, so I'm a little unsure between a bridleway and a track. You know, is it a bridleway? Is it a track? Can you drive vehicles up there?
Yeah, it's a bridleway, so it's...
So it's not for vehicles to drive up there with equipment to offload a purpose-built barn or stables or whatever. I think Eamon's going to jump in.
Well, again, I'm not a rights-of-way officer, but you can see from the photograph there that there is a track. It's a bridleway over which vehicles may or may not have a right to drive. You've seen the photographs there. There are two other properties on it. They drive vehicles to and from those properties, presumably including horse vehicles, presumably including removal vehicles, presumably including deliveries from the local supermarket. So the fact remains it is a bridleway over which horses and people can walk, and as long as it's not being obstructed for the use by horses and other users, walkers, etc., then I'm not sure that you can stop vehicles from driving up and down there if they have a legal right to do so.
Through you, Chair, well, that's the issue, isn't it? You know, obviously the people that live there and their houses are going to have the vehicles on there, and they've done that, but does that mean just because they do that everybody else can use it as a road as well? I'm not so sure, but I don't know if there's a legal precedent on that, because if it's a bridleway, it's for pedestrians, riders, that sort of thing.
Again, through you, Chairman, the bridleway is not affected by this proposal. There are rights-of-way officers and there are other legal restrictions in terms of how the bridleway operates. What I'm seeing is a track over which vehicles have a right to go back and forth as part of their normal routine. You're being asked to determine the application for a stable building off that bridleway. It doesn't actually directly affect it. Indirectly, yeah, you may have concerns about the use of vehicles going up and down to that site. The Highway Authority have not indicated any objections in that respect.
Councillor Ware.
Eamon and Bob, could you just confirm, is this application including a menage or not? Because I'm really confused. We've got he said, she said. It's not. It definitely does not include a menage.
The report before you is entitled Proposed Stable Building with Turnout Area and Vehicular Access to Existing Track Bridleway for Personal Recreational Use. That's the description of the development. Yeah, if on the website there's something that is misleading or whatever, that's not before you. The menage is not before this committee. But you've obviously heard representations about the potential for future development. Yep. You'll have to weigh those in the balance. Officers are satisfied the current application doesn't include that proposal.
Thank you, Eamon.
Sorry, Chair, can I be excused for 2 minutes?
Yep.
Can I be excused for 2 minutes, please?
Sure. Okay. Anyone else wish to ask any questions? Does anyone wish to make a proposal at this stage? Councillor Cartwright.
this is clearly an issue. I'm not sure we're going to go, but I'll reluctantly suggest that we accept the report and the recommendations as is.
And, do you wish to make any conditions as part of that, or?
Well, I don't know if they're going to be valid. It was the issue. You know, there's supposedly conditions already there. I don't know that I can make any more that would be valid and reasonable according to what we've heard from the officers tonight. So I'll have to leave it at that.
Okay. Does anyone wish to second the proposal by Councillor Cartwright? Councillor McMurtry.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the conditions, I do believe it sort of adequately accounts for a lot of the concerns. So yeah, I'd be happy to second that proposal.
Okay. Do you wish to summarise?
Thank you, Chair. It's proposed by Councillor Cartwright and seconded by Councillor McMurtry that the application be approved in accordance with the officer's recommendations, subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, can we see a show of hands in favour of Councillor Cartwright's proposal? All those in favour? All those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Any abstentions?
2. That's a tie, Chair. Do you wish to make a casting vote?
Yeah, I will vote in favour.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So that is carried. 5 votes for, 5 votes against, with 2 abstentions, and it is carried on the Chair's casting vote in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now move to item 7, which is land west of Rotherthorpe Road, Kislingbury. I will now hand over to the case officer, Shamal London, to begin the presentation.
The first one I've had approved on the Chair's casting vote.
Sorry, Chair, can we have a break for 5 minutes, please? German or...
Yeah, okay, we'll take a 5-minute break quickly for your benefit.
Just going to have a chat with Mr. Payne and make sure that he received my email yesterday morning.
Okay. Obviously not a regular at church, then maybe the wooden pews. Probably. Thing is though, you Okay, so we now move on to item 7, and I'll hand over to Shamal London to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Evening all. Yeah, that one. Yeah, thanks. The application site is located on, this is a red outline of the application site on the right and is an aerial view of the site with the star marking the location of the site. The application site is located on the southern edge of Kislingbury and comprises of a 1.91 hectare parcel of land situated within the defined settlement confines. To the north lies the completed Phase 1 development consisting of mixed 1- and 2-storey dwellings. The western boundary adjoins residential properties in Ashbury Court and the Village Hall and its car park, while the southern and eastern boundaries adjoin open countryside. The site is generally flat and enclosed by native hedgerows and occasional trees along the northern, western and eastern boundaries, with the southern edge remaining open. Rotherthorpe Road runs to the east, providing local access between Kislingbury to the north and Rotherthorpe to the south. A combination of natural and artificial boundary treatments, including hedgerows, trees, fencing, provide screening from the M1, Rotherthorpe Road and nearby dwellings. The site is not located within or adjacent to a conservation area. However, it is located within Flood Zone 1. Next slide. Thank you. This is a map taken from the Kislingbury neighbourhood plan, which shows the allocated site highlighted in green. The site is allocated for housing under the Kislingbury neighbourhood plan, reference KNP 01, identified within policy HS3. It is also referenced as SNC 397. The scheme proposes consent for the erection of 48 dwellings to be constructed on a parcel of land to the south of the village of Kislingbury and to the west of Rotherthorpe Road. The application site proposes 17% affordable housing, public open space and associated infrastructure, including drainage and landscaping. The scheme proposes new vehicular access, which is to be taken from Rotherthorpe Road. The scheme also proposes publicly accessible open spaces, which lies to the east of the site and comprises of amenity green space and an orchard area. There would be pedestrian links and cycle connections to freely traverse throughout the site. The pedestrian footpaths would link through the site to connect with existing pathways to Phase 1 and to the rest of the village. In addition, the scheme proposes car parking for future occupiers and visitor parking. It also proposes a wide array of hard and soft landscaping across the application site. It is important to note the application would form Phase 2 of the site, with Phase 1 previously being constructed, which comprised of, as aforementioned, 44 dwellings. This is to the north of the proposed site. So on this map, outlined in red is the Phase 2, which is the scheme before you today, and to the north of that is Phase 1. In addition, the following planning objections would be secured. So the provision of financial contribution for education, namely secondary and post-16 level, the provision of affordable housing on site, the provision of financial contribution for refuse and recycling, the provision of on-site public open space, the provision of financial contribution to Kislingbury Parish Council for off-site outdoor play space or maintenance of, biodiversity net gain, and community infrastructure levy payments, SIL. During the consultation, there were a total of 16 neighbour objections. There was also an objection from Anglian Water and the Parish Council. No other consultees objected. In regard to the Anglian Water objection, a condition is to be attached for additional details to be provided for Anglian Water in regard to foul drainage. Anglian Water was reconsulted but issued no following comments. Officers were informed today that Anglian Water have reached out to the applicant in discussion of the draft condition. It is considered that the addition of this condition is sufficient to overcome their concern. Again, thank you. This slide shows this slide shows a table to the right with a breakdown of the housing mix of both market and affordable housing units. The indicative plan to the left shows the layout of all units, with the pink and purple units representing affordable units and others being the market housing. There was an addendum to Table 1 at paragraph 7.2 of the officer's report to be in keeping with the table shown at paragraph 2.4. What the addendum clarified is that there would be 3 one-bedroom affordable housing units. These would be 1 bungalow and 2 maisonettes. The maisonettes are in one building, with the maisonette at ground floor and then a maisonette at first floor, with access taken from the ground floor. The scheme proposes 17% affordable housing. Officers acknowledge that this provision is below the requirement of the Kingsbury Neighbourhood Plan and the local plan. However, both documents are considerate of a lower provision if it is demonstrated why the policy-compliant 50% cannot be achieved. The applicant demonstrated this within a financial viability assessment, which was reviewed by an independent viability consultant appointed by the council. It should be added that the council's strategic officer also commented on the application and was accepting of the 17% affordable housing when taking into consideration the viability concerns. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So this slide shows the proposed, okay. Yeah, no, never mind. This slide presents the proposed street scene of the development throughout the site. It presents illustrative elevation plans of the proposed house types. Yeah, thank you. This slide shows the proposed layout of the site incorporating landscaping and open space, soft and hard landscaping. It is soft and hard landscaping. It is proposed across the site as an integral part of the development. This includes an area of open space in the eastern part of the site, including an attenuation pond, community orchid, and retention of existing trees and hedgerows. Next slide, thanks. This slide shows the layout of the site as is proposed. This slide shows the layout of the site and its proposed parking spaces. Parking would be provided in line with the council's parking SPD. Approximately 98 parking spaces would be provided to serve both residents and visitors. So these are photos looking up and down Rotherthorpe Road. So this is where the access would be taken from. And so this is a photo so the photo to the left is the photo that shows the view when looking outside of the site across the road from Rotherthorpe Road, and the other photo is a view of the application site. The photo to the left again is another view of the application site with phase 1 development, as you can see on the right hand side, and the photo to the right is just a photo of the existing phase 1 development. Okay, and this is just a wider context, an aerial view taken from Google of the application site. So I'll start off to the top of the application site. You can see the M1, and yeah, down. Possibly you can point. Okay, no, it's fine. And the open green space, not the space directly next to the M1, the space closest to the dwellings, that's where the application site would be, and nearest to that is the phase 1 that exists, and surrounding those is where the Kingsbury Village Hall and the neighbouring properties are. So in summary, the application site has been allocated for residential development within the neighbourhood plan. Due to being situated within a residential area, the proposal would be seen in context to its site and surroundings. The scheme is considered to provide an array of benefits such as affordable housing, contribution for education for secondary and post-16 level, provision of contribution for refuse and recycling, the provision of public on-site open space, the provision of contribution for off-site outdoor play space, biodiversity net gain, and SIL payments, so community infrastructure levy. These would be secured through Section 106 contributions. While it is noted the site would be... Considering the contributions and everything laid out before, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions in the Section 106 contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, are there any questions from the committee to the officers? Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I'm pleased to see that Anglian Water are back in the mix with the proposal. There's just something strange when you read the report. The parish council are objecting. They're still objecting, and yet they've agreed to take care of the outdoor play space. Is that right?
So an email was sent to the parish council, and outlining the contribution amounts, and we did ask if there were any ongoing opportunities for the money to be contributed. An email was received, a rebuttal was received to that email, and it just outlined an objection.
So they're not going to take the play space on?
Well, the contribution will be given. However, if the money is not taken, then I believe...
Sorry,
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah. So if the money remains, so it isn't taken up, then the money would eventually go back to the developer. It's not unusual with these type of schemes when off-site contributions are proposed that the parish council is reluctant to accept the contributions during the application process, because obviously they don't want to be seen to, they are obviously objecting to the scheme. However, depending on the outcome of tonight, and if it is approved, then they may welcome the contributions in terms of upgrading any existing facilities within the village.
Thank you, gents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Ware.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask for officers to clarify something for me. In 9.1 of the report, it talks about the neighbourhood development plan for phases 1 and 2, and talks about cumulative total of 92 dwellings. Is that 92 across 1 and 2, or is that 90?
Cumulatively, yeah, between 1 and 2, between
okay.
phase 1 and 2.
Okay, and so the indicative figure in the neighbourhood development plan was 40 for 1 and 2.
So the site is allocated for 40 dwellings. However, the phase 1 scheme in 2017 came forward for 44 dwellings. That was approved, and then now this application would supplement that, coming for 48 dwellings. Yes.
But just to clarify, the neighbourhood development plan says 40 for both phase 1 and phase 2.
The neighbourhood plan says 40 for the allocated site, yes.
Thank you very much.
Chair, just very quickly, whilst that slides up, what's that sort of jutting out bit at the bottom? Can you explain that? What's that doing there?
Where are you referring to, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just where you were pointing. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that exactly that. Thank you, Chair. What's that do?
Yeah, it's a turning head. Yeah.
Again, it's not unusual in my experience in planning for developers to have that element within a proposed layout. It doesn't mean there's going to be something happening in the future. You determine the application that's before you. I can see that you're obviously querying why is there a turning head there on the edge of the field, but you've got to look at the application that's before you. What happens in the future is another matter.
Thank you, Chair. Since you brought up the subject of your considerable experience, have you ever known a development like this where that's provided and it not be extended?
Not in this area, because I've never dealt with this area.
Any further questions from the committee? No? Okay, we now move to public speaking in the following order. Chris Payne, a local flood warden.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Chris Payne and I'm the flood warden for Kislingbury Village. In paragraph 7.98, Anglian Water has objected to the development because of the capacity constraints and pollution risks. Heard this evening that that might have been overturned. I don't know. Also subject to what is in writing. It has suggested, Anglian Water suggested that until safe foul water strategy is in writing, no development should take place. Now, I believe that probably has been rescinded. I don't know. I'd like to see the conditions of that. There has already been 2 major issues with the Spitfire pumping station, where it failed. The present system then travels uphill and joins the Anglian Water system in Ashby Court. In paragraph 7.99, the LLFA state they're happy with the surface water flow rates, but require a survey of the receiving drainage system. To explain this away, the present surface water in the existing site goes to the balancing pond, the attenuation lake, if you like, at the front of the estate, bordering Rotherthorpe Road. And then it falls from there into the ditch which runs north-south on the west side of the Rotherthorpe Road. From there, it travels through a short culvert underneath the road to the east side of the north-south ditch. From there, it goes underground, but via a big culvert down to a lake to the east, something in the region of about 500 yards. And it joins up with a stream which takes water from Swan Valley. It then goes into Camp Lane, travels eastward along Camp Lane, where we get future flooding, which has increased since Swan Valley has been in existence, and then it passes through to the Nen. During November 24 downpour, the ditch outside the Pembleton estate, the existing estate, was overwhelmed. And it flooded back into the existing balancing pond. If anybody knows the actual site itself, you'll know that there is a mud island in the middle of that lake. And it was because the liner lifted, because it wasn't inserted properly, and now you've actually got less capacity in that lake. Hence, we're a little bit concerned about the workmanship involved. Those ditches are not maintained. They are overgrown. If you look at them now, you'll see that they're overgrown. There is no maintenance schedule. The developers disappeared off site before we could actually address the problems when there were problems that arose. And they've been very reluctant to do anything about coming back to fix the problems.
Can you conclude your statements, please?
Yes. Now, Pembleton, Spitfire have been somewhat absent and leaving it basically to the local authority as and when that happens again, which it will because of climate. Who's going to pick up the tab for clearing that ditch out and clearing the culverts out? I would recommend that you reject the application based on very poor workmanship by Spitfire. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for the speaker? Did the officer want to outline any conditioning around the raised?
In regard to the point you made about Anglian Water, they haven't rescinded the objection. So we have attached a condition to the application. In Anglian Water's comments, they did ask for a condition to be attached. So that was basically a holding objection. In that condition, it does request additional information to be submitted for Anglian Water to provide comments. In regard to what I mentioned before, the applicant have been in contact with Anglian Water, and they are accepting of the condition being attached. So there is still holding objection, but we have attached a condition for additional information.
And I'd also say, through you, Chair, that obviously there's a comprehensive list of conditions going from condition 7 all the way through to condition 12, which deals with drainage and surface water treatment, including condition 8, which relates to a detailed management and maintenance plan for the lifetime of development with regards to drainage details and arrangements for adoption by any public body or statutory undertaking. Now, clearly, no public body or statutory undertaker would obviously take on or adopt the system if it was inadequate. So obviously there is provisions in place and conditions secured relating to the maintenance and management of the drainage for the lifetime of the development. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just comment on that? Do you mind? Our experience is that local authorities, due to budget, are found wanting when it comes to requesting certain things that are quite pivotal to clearing away flood issues. Like I say, the developers tend to disappear into the thin air, and you cannot get them back on site. We struggle to get them back on site. You know, we're tearing our hair out sometimes. So, I mean, our previous experience with Spitfire has not been good, and they've tried to bulldoze this through with us, having a nice meeting with lots of pretty pictures, and it really wasn't. You know, we're not convinced.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Okay. And I'll call on Jonathan Hughes on behalf of the Kislingbury Parish Council.
Members, the Parish Council is concerned that this report downplays the significance of the Kislingbury Neighbourhood Plan. The report should remind councillors about the standing of the neighbourhood plans within the planning framework, and that NPs are enabled by the Localism Act 2011 and empower local communities to shape their area's development. It should note that the Kislingbury MP was approved by a majority of voters in a referendum and was formally adopted by the local planning authority. It is thus part of the statutory development plan for the area and carries legal weight in the planning process. The report should make it explicit this application is for a site agreed as a preferred site through the NP process, and that, in this context, the policies contained within the Kislingbury NP are actually the key policies. The report should not undermine the importance of the Kislingbury Neighbourhood Plan. The report should not refer to the already built Pembleton as Phase 1 and to the current application as Phase 2. It should point out that there has never been an application for a Phase 1. It should not use the term Phase 1 36 times, plus 3 times in objections, and Phase 2 9 times, including once in an objection. It should not use this Spitfire Homes marketing device to create the impression that the current application is, basically, just a continuation of what was agreed under the Neighbourhood Development Plan. It should not attempt to reinforce this impression by referring to Phase 1 as, quote, already implemented, quote, already approved, quote, previously implemented, and, quote, the neighbouring Phase 1. And it's evident on the diagrams too that this is the terminology. The report should not, para 7.4, refer to Upper Hayford to locate Kislingbury within the Villagement Settlement Scheme. The report should not, para 7.15, suggest there is no justification for housing numbers made within the Kislingbury NP, and it should certainly not use this to justify the suggestion that this omission permits officers to see agreed numbers in the NP as a guide rather than a minimum. Actually, it's in there. If the officer taking the trouble to look, it's Appendix D, available on our website. It should recognise that the case for numbers is laid out in option 6, page 21 of the Kislingbury Parish Council NDP Housing Needs Assessment, available on our website, and these numbers were included in the NP adopted by the LPA. The report should not attempt to persuade the committee that there are economic and social benefits that would justify the overriding of agreed housing numbers. The report should not, para 9.6, be using unsupported claims that the policies in the NP can be outweighed by a range of vague benefits and enhancements. It should recognise that the economic and social gains will be minimal. The report should not suggest these purely hypothetical benefits are reason enough to depart from making policy-based recommendations. The report should not be making untestable claims there will be no impact on the character of the village because the so-called Phase 2 is so similar to the so-called Phase 1. In contrast, the report should set out that if the two phases are added together, this would represent an increase of 15.8% on the number of pre-Pembleton dwellings. I hope the Kissenbury Flood Warden, as I already outlined, I can't tell you as a committee what you should do.
Can you conclude your statement, please?
Okay. If you decide to accept the report's treatment of the Kissenbury Neighbourhood Plan, then you'll be sending a message to 165 West Northants town and parish councils that there's no point going to the effort and expense of developing neighbourhood plans, and that's a further blow to local participation in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Ware.
This is you might not be able to answer this. What was the percentage of approval in your referendum? Can you recall?
I can't. We only required a simple majority.
Okay. And my second question might be more to officers than to yourself, but something that you've said just made me think. Was Phase 1 a completely different planning application under a different reference, completely separate, not referred to as Phase 1?
Yes.
Yes, it would have been under a different reference number, yes. You're welcome.
Okay, any further questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now call on Councillor Phil Bignell, the local ward member.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm speaking as ward member on an objectivist application on two main grounds, which I will outline. Kissenbury produced a neighbourhood plan back around 2015, and one was the first in the area and was so good it actually won a national award, and they went to London to collect it. It has served them well over the years and has controlled and defined expansion which has occurred since in the village. It is an up-to-date document and is valid till 2029. The plan is explicitly described as a statutory document that will incorporate into the district planning frameworks and must be used to determine planning applications. The plan for Kissenbury aims to protect the village's character, limit large-scale or poorly placed developments, define village confines, protect open spaces and green buffers, and ensure development is sympathetic to the village scale and identity. This plan allows for 40 houses to be built in this location, and 44 have already been built and was called Spitfire 1, mistakenly, adjacent to this application. So the development zone in this area has already been fulfilled. As for further development sites, 5.8.1 says large-scale development over and above that proposed in this plan is not acceptable to the community. If new housing is proposed in Kissenbury, in addition to the main proposal, the consensus is that it should be delivered through several smaller infill sites within the village confines. It is a matter of weight you apply to the neighbourhood plan, and more recently a planning inspector dismissed proposals for 19 new homes in Oxfordshire and medium development in Richborough because they both conflicted with the relevant neighbourhood plan policy. I refer to the MPPF, in particular paragraph 11, which says all decisions should apply the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Furthermore, paragraph 15 states neighbourhood plans shape where development should go. So this shows the alignment of national policy in the MPPF and the Kissenbury neighbourhood plan, and so I suggest that the combined weight outweighs the reason for acceptance. We have a current land supply of over 5 years in the area, and so are not forced to accept all developments. And it is our duty as a committee to respect local plans backed by the MPPF to allow only suitable and needed development and decide where they are built, and this site is not one of them. Secondly, yet again, a development comes along with affordable housing at a percentage which is less than both the SNC Local Plan Part 2, still in existence, and the Kissenbury Plan, which both specify 50% affordable. The figure of 17% is far below the target, and the argument of feasibility is used yet again to try and justify the mismatch. The shortfall in affordable homes exacerbates a documented local need. provision at 17% would fall well below the identifiable needs locally for this rural service village. The NPPF says developers cannot use inflated land values to justify lower affordable housing. So finally, I urge you to reject this proposal as it fails against the NPPF and, more importantly, the neighbourhood plan, as well as not providing sufficient affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I now call on Sarah Butterfield, agent for the applicant.
Good evening. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Spitfire Homes, who are seeking approval for the development of land at Rothersthorpe Road, Kislingbury, for 48 dwellings. The principle of residential development here is acceptable. Kislingbury is identified as a secondary village in the settlement hierarchy for West Northamptonshire. It has a range of local services and is a suitable and sustainable location for growth. The site is within the defined settlement boundary for the village and forms part of a site allocated for development in the neighbourhood plan. It is acknowledged that the development exceeds the number of dwellings that the neighbourhood plan allocation proposed. However, it falls within the overall allocation, and as set out in national guidance, housing numbers in development plans are to be considered a minimum. The site is within the defined development boundary for Kislingbury Village, where development plan policy allows for development within defined settlement boundaries where relevant criteria are met. In this case, and as set out in the officer report, the development comprises an appropriate mix and density of dwellings. It does not require substantial new infrastructure, and it would not displace an existing viable use, therefore complies with the relevant policy in terms of principle. Access will be taken from Rothersthorpe Road. The scheme promotes active travel and provides sustainable links to Phase 1 and the wider village. Vehicular and cycle parking meet policy requirements, and there are no Highways Authority objections to the proposal. Green infrastructure will also be enhanced through the provision of on-site landscaping, and B&G of at least 10% will be secured through on- and off-site measures. On drainage and flooding, the lead local flood authority has worked diligently and directly with the applicant to address all matters raised, and the array of conditions set out in the officer report are considered acceptable. Also, as set out in the officer report, Anglian Water's comments are identified as a holding objection, but the applicant has been speaking with Anglian Water. They accept the condition proposed, which requires the foul drainage strategy to be submitted, and the applicant has also received confirmation that their proposed strategy is an acceptable way forward in principle. All of the technical matters have been considered and addressed, including noise, air quality, B&G, ecology and agricultural land and contamination. There are no outstanding technical matters which would prevent planning permission being granted. The proposal would deliver 48 homes, 8 of which will be affordable. Whilst this is below policy requirements, it is the highest level that can be reasonably delivered. As you've heard, a robust financial viability appraisal has been submitted and independently reviewed, and an appropriate level of affordable housing has been identified and agreed accordingly. Alongside, still will be paid, and the development will also deliver financial obligations toward investments in children's play space, education and waste collection facilities. In summary, the development proposal complies with development plan policies and represents sustainable development in line with local and national policy. We ask you to support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Frost.
Can you repeat what you said about the 40 being a minimum?
Yeah, so whilst the neighbourhood plan allocation was for 40 dwellings, national policy set out in the NPPF states that housing numbers in development plans should be considered a minimum rather than a maximum. Or,
Have you got the clause in the NPPF?
not to hand, and I can't get on the internet, unfortunately. It's well established that policies are a minimum, and the standard method sets out a minimum number of housings.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Cartwright.
Through you, just on that NPPF 11, 130, Part A, this plan should contain policies to optimise the use of land in their area and meet as much of the identified need for housing as possible. This will be tested robustly at examination and should include the use of minimum density standards for city and town centres and other locations.
Yeah, I'm even more confused now because I can't see that doesn't say that we should treat the numbers in neighbourhood plans as a minimum.
Well, B says the use of minimum density standards should also be considered for other parts of the plan area. May be appropriate to set out a range of densities that reflect.
Through you, Chair, clearly within what's running through the whole of the MPPF is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. So in terms of WNC, whilst we are at the moment meeting our housing land supply, it doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't approve applications for housing schemes where there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development.
You know, I absolutely get that, but in my ward there's 14 parishes and most of them have done neighbourhood plans, and I need to you know, avail myself of this information because the numbers they've got in their plans, they certainly don't regard them as minimums. So maybe some work for me to do.
Okay, any further questions from the committee? No, thank you very much. Okay, so I've now moved to the officers to see if there's any points you wish to come back on.
Yeah, so in regard to density, so strictly speaking, if the scheme was to be strictly policy compliant with the neighbourhood plan, it would give rise to approximately 12 dwellings per hectare. The scheme before you proposes 25 dwellings per hectare, and cumulatively between the scheme recently approved and this application, it would give rise to 24.86 dwellings per hectare. Now, for guidance, in the core strategy, policy H1 gives an indication for sustainable urban extensions to have a density of approximately 35 dwellings per hectare. Now, this is a rural area. However, that is an indication of what developments of a similar ilk should be achieving. Quite frankly, at 12 dwellings per hectare, this would not be seen as efficient use of land, and it would not be in keeping with the MPPF. Now, we do note the weight given to the neighbourhood plan, but we also have to give weight to the MPPF, which is 2024, and it is a more recent document, and it is in favour for development, in favour of sustainable development. The second point I wanted to touch on was affordable housing. So officers do note that, yes, it was 17% affordable housing, and that is lower than the 50% that should be achieved. However, in both the neighbourhood plan and the local plan, it does recognise that should the developer identify why they cannot achieve the 50% requirement for affordable housing, weight should be given to this. The applicant has submitted financial viability. They have done a financial viability assessment, which was also reviewed by a third-party consultant appointed by the local authority, the council. They agreed with the findings of the financial viability assessment and concluded that 17% affordable housing would be the most that could be provided should the scheme be considered acceptable. I mean, there would be Section 106 contributions as well as community infrastructure levy contributions. So those are the 2 points I just wanted to touch on the density and affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we now move to a debate. If any committee members would like to start. Councillor Frost.
Desperately trying to rack what's left in my brain to remember the application was similar to this, and the committee, there were lots of arguments in favour of the applicant put forward, but the committee decided it was just too dense, and it was refused on that basis, and they went away and they came back, and it wasn't just too dense, it was just so out of keeping with the area, and they came back about 3 months later with a plan that was the density was less, and it simple terms, it looked better, and then the committee agreed it. I put it to you guys that you know, we can do better than this in West Northamptonshire. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it seems a bit bizarre that the neighbourhood plan set out for 40 on this plot, and the way they're phrasing it, split up into phase 1 and 2, just sounds a bit, trying to find the right words here. Yeah, there you go, I'll use that word.
It seems disingenuous. It seems disingenuous.
Yeah, it feels like they're not trying to trick us, but sort of split the application. And national policy says that the neighbourhood plans of 40 minimum that the neighbourhood plan set out. Again, that just seems a little bit bizarre to me, but again, it's debate, so I'm up to hearing anything.
The 40's been achieved, and yeah, it does feel a bit disingenuous to label the previous one phase 2 when that wasn't what it was advertised as. So yeah, I think more weight should be given to the neighbourhood plan. I don't really agree with it being completely disregarded, so I think that should be given more weight.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm struggling here because I believe that local people should be the ones making the decision, but unfortunately at the stage we're in we don't get to make that choice. As the councillor pointed out in his speech, the section 11 making use of land, efficient use of the land. We had the figures. It's 35 hectares is the maximum units, for want of a better word, per hectare. The neighbourhood plan was at 12 units, and it's in 130 paragraph C that says if it doesn't make efficient use of the land, then you should reject it. So I believe what the NPPF is saying is that 12 is way too small. 35 that's allowed is rabbit hutch, shoebox habitable, but they're putting 25 per hectare, and it doesn't look as bad as it could be from what it says here, and we're sort of stuck with the legislation pressing down on you, as we're well aware of in this committee, and 25 units per hectare is a reasonable density, I think, considering where it is. Over to you.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Adrian, on the sufficient use of the land. Yes, 35 is the maximum. It's 28, I believe. Is that right, officers? 25?
This scheme would be 25, yeah.
Oh,
but
sorry.
together it would be 24.86, yeah. So 25.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So I agree that the sufficient use of land is perfectly fine. But then, like the parish council said, what's the point in having a neighbourhood plan if we're not going to follow it? Or at least use it as guidance.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I 100% agree, but this is what we're left with. Until it changed at Westminster, this is what we're stuck with.
Okay. Councillor Tarbin.
No, personally, I'm under the opinion that the neighbourhood plan should be given weight, and it should be kind of read as understood by the people who wrote it.
Okay. So, yeah. Councillor Cartwright.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that, but the toothpaste out the tube, because the whole site should have been at that, and what they've done with that, half that development has gone over the 40 anyway. So you've now add that to the total amount of properties in the area. So this new extension is a smaller percentage than it would have been.
Councillor Tarbin.
But as a kind of rebuttal to that, that should have been considered when the first application came in. And now we're being given a second application that puts it over the top. But
okay. Yep.
Through you, Chair, just to provide perhaps a bit more context. So the neighbourhood plan, so this document was adopted prior to the South Northamptonshire Local Plan Part 2. At the time that the neighbourhood plan was adopted, this site itself was outside of the village confines, and hence the reason for its allocation within the neighbourhood plan to allow the principle of housing on this site to be acceptable. Since such time, the local plan part 2 has now been adopted. and this site has now been brought into the settlement confines. And as such, the principle of development in terms of housing on this site isn't purely reliant on the neighbourhood plan because it's acceptable in terms of the development plan because it's within the settlement confines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rainbird.
Sorry, so just put it in layman's terms. So because now it falls within the village confines, the neighbourhood plan doesn't apply.
I mean, it's still a material consideration because it still forms part of the development plan. However, we have to consider it in the context of all the other plans and policies within the development plan, including the national planning framework, which obviously sets out a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Policy SS1 within the local plan part 2 obviously allows housing development within settlement confines, and because this site is now within the settlement confines, which it previously wasn't when the neighbourhood plan was adopted, the principle of the development is acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Frost.
Just back to this density thing. I'm just frantically trawling through the NPPF to get some more details, but this 35 figure maximum, that's for sort of inner cities and things like that. That's got nothing to do with West Northamptonshire. This is a quite sort of pretty village on the outskirts, and we should be thinking in terms of 12 per hectare. The other figures are not relevant in this case, as far as I'm concerned.
Councillor Ware.
So again, just to get my head round the neighbourhood development plan and the change in the curtilage of the village, was phase 1 within the curtilage of the village when it was passed for approval?
Through you, Chair, I believe it would have been, yes.
So this second parcel of land, which has been deemed phase 2, is a new addition to the curtilage of the village?
No, it's within this site, which we're considering tonight, is within the settlement confines. So when this site was allocated within the neighbourhood plan, and when the new local plan for South Northamptonshire was adopted, the village confines was brought out to accommodate this site within the settlement confines.
Okay, anyone else? Does anyone wish to make a proposal? Councillor Cartwright.
Here we go again. Well, we seem to be hit with the legislation again, so I propose we accept the proposal as is presented with the Anglian Water to condition their drainage proposals and any other conditions that are in the proposal.
Does anyone wish to second Councillor Cartwright's proposal? I take it that means it falls? Falls. Okay. Does anyone wish to make a counter proposal?
I think further debate is needed, considering the complexity of the application, I believe. So I don't know what does other people think.
Through you, Chair, I propose refusal. I just want some advice from the officers, particularly Nathan. The neighbourhood plan we can obviously use as a reason, but I suspect you're going to say that's not reason enough. If the committee were minded to refuse it, what reasons might we give?
Yeah, I mean, through you, Chair, obviously, the report's in front of you. I'd struggle to think of a reason to refuse this particular application. I know we keep debating about the density requirements, but I set out within the report we consider that the density is acceptable. It's the same density that was delivered within the first part of the site. So to reject, I guess, the same density again on this other site, I think you'd struggle in terms of saying that it's now out of character with the with kind of like the village and this rural area, when it's the same density as the first part, which was delivered under a previous scheme.
I'm puzzled about that, because I would like to think that the inspector would look at the refusal in the context of the neighbourhood plan and agree with it. Otherwise, as someone said earlier, what is the point of neighbourhood plans?
Yeah, but I mean, through you, I mean, obviously, I've repeated again, but obviously this neighbourhood plan was adopted before the South Northamptonshire local plan, and the reason for its allocation was because it was outside the settlement confines, so it needed to be allocated in order for housing to be delivered on this site. But since such time, the site has now been brought forward into the settlement confines, so the principle of development is no longer reliant on the neighbourhood plan, and there are other plans within the local plan. It's all about weighing and the balancing exercise of the policies and which weight you give to those policies. But our assessment and our judgment is that we give more weight to certain policies, such as SS1 in terms of where development can be located within settlement confines.
Councillor Rainbird.
Sorry, Nathan. I'd just like to ask then. Obviously, now that the plot allocation, if you like, is now within the village confines, and obviously the neighbourhood plan was written when it was outside the village confines, would you then recommend that the neighbourhood plan be looked at and rewritten, or just trying to, don't know?
Yeah, I mean, that would be something for our development strategy team to review in partnership with the parish council. Obviously, as we've got a new local plan emerging, it may be an opportunity for the parish council to have a look at their neighbourhood plan and have discussions with our development strategy team to see, if it can be, adopted or brought up to date, perhaps to respond positively to the emerging local plan.
But then the neighbourhood plans, from what I'm saying, is obviously a statutory document that's eligible till 2029. So obviously, does that mean the period of its duration should be shortened, or as in of the legality of it? Or would that again be the other team that you spoke of?
Yes, yeah, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. That would be more for our development strategy team in terms of that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thanks, Chair. The original proposal has failed, so it now falls to the committee to come up with a different proposal. But I'm curious, if they can't come up with a different proposal, do we go back to the original proposal again? Does that get brought back again? So the committee needs to come up with a proposal, or why we go back again? All right, thank you.
Councillor Ware.
I'm just thinking about weighing up the economic, social and environmental benefits of the scheme, and thinking about that imbalance. To that point, I would like to know if anything has been done about a local housing needs survey. Have we got any evidence that this village is in need of additional housing?
Through you, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. The planners might correct me. It's when you're talking about housing needs, it's not for specific villages. It's for West Northamptonshire Council as the whole entire area as a whole, not individual villages. Thank you.
Councillor Ware.
That's interesting, because Brixworth Parish has just done housing needs survey for Brooksworth Parish. So that's not a need for the whole of West Northants. That's specifically about what that particular parish requires.
Yeah, Brixworth obviously lies within the former Daventry District Council area. In that you have policies that relate to development outside the confines of the village where local housing need would play a part. And for those members who remember a fairly recent application we had at Kilsby that was very much at the forefront, that application was refused by committee on the grounds they weren't satisfied that there was an up-to-date local need. I'm not aware that what you've got here is, from what I'm hearing, I say I'm not familiar with Kilsby or Kislinbury, you have a neighbourhood plan that is older than the most recent local plan, and therefore, whilst it still forms, the neighbourhood plan still forms part of the development plan, the weight to be afforded to it, officers are saying, should be less than the local plan, which puts the whole of the site within the confines of the village, without any limitations or restrictions on the numbers of dwellings that go in there. So in that sense, I think members have to have a very serious think if they're going to place greater weight on an older local plan or an older part of the development plan. You need to then demonstrate why you're setting aside more recent, up-to-date part of the development plan in terms of the Part 2, which places the development within the confines of the village.
Thank you. Councillor Frost. Just dealing with the first point, in answer to Sean, it's housing needs surveys done by parish, correct? I mean, they are in the Woodford and Weedham ward anyway. It's not a county thing. They're done by parish. Simple as that. That's not a debatable thing. That's just a fact, isn't it?
I'm told it's a Daventry policy, and we're not in Daventry.
It might be the case that Daventry has a need. I mean, I live in Staverton, and I can assure you that the parish of Staverton has or had a housing need.
Again, through you, Chairman, yeah, it's been well established in the former Daventry area that local parishes will conduct their own housing needs surveys, and that helps inform both neighbourhood development plans, but also helps inform development plan and planning applications in and around the confines of the village. But in respect of those policies, it allows for development within the confines of the village. It plays a part when looking at development adjoining or outside the confines of the village. This isn't the case here. You have a site that is within the confines of the village as established by the Part 2 local plan, and that is a more recent policy stance than the neighbourhood plan, which obviously set the site outside of the confines, but allocated it presumably to accommodate for additional housing growth.
Thank you. And just with regards to the sort of impasse that's emerging, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, that when we were in a similar position to this, pretty sure it's before May the 1st, the grounds for refusal was too dense. Wish I could find the specifics, but that was what happened. So, but it's it's up to you guys what you decide. But there's a precedent, is what I'm saying.
Councillor Rainbird.
So I'd like to just go back off what the officer said. So what I'm hearing is we've got an older local, neighbourhood plan. We've got more recent, up-to-date local plan. So now we've got to either put more weight on the neighbourhood older plan or the more up-to-date newer plan. So I'd just like to see where everyone's head's at and just see what one we're more likely to put more weight on.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we've got to deal with the application before us. I'm just conscious that if the committee can't make a decision at all, then the applicant just goes to the planning inspector for non-determination and goes that way. Is that the score? If we don't have a proposal that we can pass?
Thank you, Chair. I'd defer to officers on what the application time limit is for determination.
I mean, I think you know, we have an application here tonight to determine. I think it would be very unreasonable, and indeed, you know, we may have an application of costs against us if we chose not to determine it and let the applicants go to appeal. That's certainly not the purpose of the local planning authority. We're here to determine applications that are submitted before us, and not simply not determine them because we cannot make a decision and leave it to the planning inspectorate should the applicant want to appeal against non-determination. I think, you know, we're very much at risks of costs if we adopt such an attitude.
Councillor Ware.
So, officers, can I ask for your advice? Councillor Frost has suggested asking for your advice on what would be the reason was the committee minded to not approve this application. And I think what you've said is there isn't a reason that you can see that would hold water should we get an appeal. Can you just clarify that you cannot see a reason why we can't put more weight on an older neighbourhood development plan, and we can't look at density and the affordability issue as well?
Please go.
Short answer is no. I mean, the officers have obviously looked at this application. They've weighed in the balance the neighbourhood plan, the more recent Part 2 local plan, and indeed the Part 1 local plan goes back to 2014. Local plans, you know, they don't hold forever. You've got to respond to sort of changes in planning policy and government policy and national policy and that sort of thing, and indeed housing demand. And whilst at the time the neighbourhood plan may have considered 44 was appropriate, that has now been overtaken by events with the adoption of the Part 2 local plan, which places the site clearly within the confines of the village without any limitations on numbers of dwellings or whatever. The numbers of dwellings have been assessed against national policy and other policies. There are no technical objections to this application. And really, as officers, we're saying that when you weigh all that in the balance, less weight has to be applied in this particular instance to the neighbourhood plan over the more recent Part 2 local plan and the overriding national policy on housing and delivering sustainable development. So you weigh all of those in the balance. Our view is we don't think that there are sustainable reasons for withholding permission, and that's our advice to you as members.
Councillor Rainbird.
Begrudgingly, like the officers have just said, I don't think we have enough grounds on refusal. If it did go to appeal, I think we would lose. So begrudgingly, I agree with officers' recommendation for approval.
Okay, is that your proposal, is it? Do we hear? Sorry, did you want to quickly? Yep. Councillor Ware.
Before we go to a proposal, I have to say that this is rather disappointing. Neighbourhood development plans are very instrumental and important for local communities taking hold of what's going on in their own particular area and having a feel like they can control and manage the development of their own particular area. I will absolutely understand and accept officers' advice here, but I want it on record that this is really disappointing that we can't use local voices in the neighbourhood plan to move it forward. What I would ask is for advice on what conditions we can put on here, because we've heard about various drainage and flood and concerns from the parish council. What conditions can we put on here to just move it in a more local guided sort of way, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll defer to officers on conditions, but on the points raised with regards to the neighbourhood development plan and the Part 2 local plan, obviously, as has been said already this evening, we're in a period where there is an emerging local plan. These issues that have been highlighted tonight are definitely things that can and should be raised through that process and can be picked up through the planning policy channels of Planning Policy Committee as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Rainbird.
Councillor, I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is a very unfortunate planning application, in my opinion. but like I said, unfortunately, there's no material grounds that we can refuse this on. And obviously, if it went to appeal, we'd lose. They'd obviously cost the council money, and they'd get planning permission anyway. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Before we proceed any further, I think Amy wanted to come back on the conditions.
Again, neighbourhood plans, much like our own local plans, we have to review them, and it's within the gift of the local community to review their plans on a regular basis. And I know there's a lot of people who've put a lot of hard work locally into getting that local plan through, or the neighbourhood plan through the process. But unfortunately, they need to be retained and maintained and up to date. And I know of a number of parishes who have undertaken reviews of their local plans or their neighbourhood plans in order to try and keep pace with the planning system and how things move forward. So as officers, no, it's not that we're ignoring the neighbourhood plan. We have to take that into the balance, and we ask you to take it into the balance. But in this particular case, we're in a position where we have to afford it less weight in this particular circumstance.
Councillor McMurtry.
Yeah, I'd just like to see clarity on that. So is what you're saying, if the neighbourhood plan had been updated and it still said 40 houses and it was therefore more recent than the MPPF, right? Then that would be given more weight. So it's just about the recency, because just because it's not been updated, does that invalidate the 40 number? Because if that's still, that 40 number is still relevant and still stands anyway, then it's difficult to see why that shouldn't be given the appropriate weight. Yeah.
Well, again, that's for you to make that judgment. We as officers have said, yes, it's part of the development plan, but there are much more recent parts of the development plan that it should be afforded greater weight. And as I say, that neighbourhood plan, I don't know when it was actually adopted, 2014 was it? 2017, so you're getting on to sort of close on 10 years. Our Daventry's areas and more recently our Part 2 local plans were adopted in the 2020s. 2024 they're now being reviewed again. So local plans, it's a constant sort of process of trying to maintain policies that are up to date. And yes, it is a burden on local communities to do that, but what we're saying tonight is that based on the application before you, having regard to the development plan, there are no sustainable reasons for withholding permission.
Yeah, but so if it had been updated, then it would be given more weight, is what you're saying?
I mean, we're wandering into the realms of what ifs and maybes. The fact is that the neighbourhood plan was adopted before the Part 2 local plan. Had the neighbourhood plan been adopted or reviewed more recently, then that would be part of the weighing exercise. That's not what's before you.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Frost.
I was just going to make the point, it's the case, isn't it, through you, Chair, that I mean, the reason why Daventry plan, which was passed in 2021, wasn't it, it's been updated is simply because of the unitary authority. I know it's only 4 years on, but if we, that's the reason why Daventry is happening, it's being subsumed within the wider West Northants. And I'm just going to ask the same similar question in a slightly different way. In order to understand, I know it's 2014, but I'm still struggling to find why it's what's made it out of date. What's wrong with it? That's what I can't understand. What's wrong with it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's because it's now within the confines of the village. It's the boundaries moved from what that was, and as it was before, that whole site, the double site, was for the 40 houses. That ship sailed. There's already 42 or 44 on the other side.
There's still 40 on the whole site, though.
There's more than 40 on the whole site already.
Okay, yeah, fine. There's 44 on the whole site.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
Yeah,
so there is around 40 on the whole site. So if it was left there, then that would be.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, I think the issue now is that there's, there should. The MPPF is that there is, you should build, that you got to, the allowance to build is there. You'd have to find reasons to not to, and I think we've been round and round the houses and we're struggling there. So the committee either needs to come up with a proposal that you think is going to hold water to refuse this, or we're going to have to go back to the original application to accept it.
For my part, I'd be happy to recommend refusal, and on the same thing I keep referring to. The applicant found themselves in a situation where they appeal, or they just tweak the original application to make it a bit more acceptable to local residents, and I'm certain that's what would happen in this case. So I'd be happy to propose, refusal. It's way too dense, and the housing has already been met on phase 1, and it's the grounds, the technical grounds would be it's a direct breach of the neighbourhood plan.
For you, Chair, I just want to mention that the density of the scheme is in keeping with the character and appearance of the area. I just wanted to put that out there.
Chair, that's not the view of the people that live there.
Okay. Councillor Rainbow, you put in a proposal earlier to... Okay, fair enough. So,
I mean, through you also, just to say that whilst what you're saying is that it may not reflect the views of the local people, it reflects the established density pattern in terms of what was delivered in the upper part of the site. So it's just a continuation of that density, that character, and that appearance.
Chair, that's true, but that wasn't what the parish wanted, was it? You know.
Okay.
Yep. I'm just doing a little bit of reading on neighbourhood plans, and the legislation says it needs to be in conformity with the local plan. So if the neighbourhood plan is made and then the local plan changes, the neighbourhood plans, to have some weight or some consideration of the weight that you give it, needs to be revised or amended to reflect the local plan changes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, there's no breach with the neighbour plan. It might be 10 years old, but it's not incompatible or inconsistent with the Daventry's local plan.
I think there was a slight change with the confines. I think that's might be the only.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I do apologise, Councillor Rainbow. No, continue. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I think the change from the local plan and the neighbourhood plan was the village confines. So now the plot is now within the village confines, whereas before it wasn't with the new local plan. But tell me if I'm wrong, officers, please.
No, you are correct. I think that's what we keep reiterating for most of the evening, the fact that, there is a clear distinction now between, the local plan was adopted prior to the adoption of the local plan. Now the local plan has come forward, it's within the settlement confines, and therefore the principle of housing development is acceptable on this site because it's within the settlement confines.
Okay. So, are we... sorry, Councillor Rainbow?
Sorry, can we go back to the vote? Because we keep going from a proposal to no seconder, and then we keep going on a debate. So can we just please...
Yep, okay. So in terms of Councillor Frost's proposal, do we have any seconders?
Yeah, I will second that proposal. But yeah, I'd like to seek advice on what legally, what terms we put that into.
Do you want me to summarise? Yes. Yep. Can I just... Again, Councillor McMurtry, I mean, I've got an aerial photograph up there of Kislinbury village, and compare that with the proposed development. I'm struggling to see how members are concerned about the density of the proposed development over and above the density of the surrounding development, the existing village. I really can't see the difference. And in my view, and certainly in officer's view, density grounds for refusal will certainly not carry any weight at an appeal, and you may well run the risk of costs, particularly when you consider everything in the round. So in the round, we're talking about your development plan, neighbourhood plan, Part 2 local plan. You also have to consider all the benefits being proposed by this development, and against that you then have to decide what is the planning harm of this development. And I simply just cannot see the planning harm of this development in the context of its immediate surroundings, which appears to be a relatively modern sort of estate development, of which this proposal is one. So you will have to come up with sound reasons that you think can be defended at appeal. And certainly the officers are strongly advising you in this particular instance that just will not carry water. I'm sorry.
Chair, I'll have a shot at that, if I may. Let's just recap here, let's rewind a little bit. So the village offered that site back in 2014 for 40 homes. For reasons I can't fathom, we allowed 42 homes to be built on around half that site, and which clearly should never have happened. But we're now saying, because it has happened, we have to replicate that intensity on the next door site. I mean, in what sense is that okay? It's crazy.
Again, through you, Chairman, no, you're being asked to consider this against the most up-to-date part of the development plan, which places the whole of this current site within the limits of the village, without any limitations in terms of restrictions on density, etc. What officers are saying is that the development as proposed is in keeping with its immediate surroundings. It's within the confines of the village, and there are no reasons for withholding permission.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to answer Councillor Frost's question, when that was put forward, the 40 properties on that bit of land that was outside the village confines. Since then, that's now in the village confines, and that's why that 40 no longer applies for the whole site, is what my understanding of this is. Is that correct?
Why would any village put forward a site if that's what's going to be done?
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't in here. It wasn't. It was outside the village confines initially.
Okay. So, do you still wish to second the proposal? Okay. So you wish to summarise?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, Councillor, you're retracting your seconding of the proposal.
Oh, you're retracting it, sorry.
In that case, we require a seconder for Councillor Frost's proposal, which I'll summarise if seconded.
Do we have a seconder? No. If no seconders, then that proposal falls. Councillor Cartwright.
Right. If we can't come up with a proposal to refuse, I'm going to have to go back to the original proposal that the officers put forward in the report with the conditions from the Anglian Water.
Okay, a seconder?
Yeah,
Councillor Rainbird? And Councillor Ware as well? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposal, as proposed by Councillor Cartwright and now seconded by Councillor Rainbird, is to accept the officer's recommendations subject to the conditions set out in the report and subject to the Section 106 obligations also set out in the report. Over to you, Chair, for the vote.
Okay, can I see a show of hands in favour of Councillor Cartwright's proposal?
6.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
And abstentions?
2. Motion
Okay.
carried.
Motion carried. We now move on to item 8, 50 Great Holm Court, Northampton. Okay, I will hand over to the case officer, Nathan Healy, to begin the presentation. Yeah.
If they had done it, then we could have refused it. Very annoying. They did. Very annoying, that one.
Sorry? You can do it. We'll break for 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, Councillor Ware won't be able to
What's happening?
No, that's fine. We'll have a 3-minute break. I think the last item, obviously. You've got 1 minute.
We call a break.
Yes.
Quite angry about that one, actually. Not angry, but a bit, a little bit upset. But hey ho, what can you do? Can't win them all. Plug the charger and been here that long. Where can I plug it in? I'll tell you what though, that was a good debate.
Okay, we resume with Nathan Healy doing a presentation. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use of a C3 dwelling to a 7-person HMO, including a single-storey rear extension. Members should be aware of an objection received from Northampton Town Council after the officers published the application, or the report. On screen now is a site location plan and an aerial view of the site. To help orientate yourselves, Falklands Primary School is to the bottom of the image. Next slide, please. Here is an image of the front and rear of the properties. As you can see, the dwelling is a 3-storey semi-detached dwelling. As you can see on the screen now, that policy supports the conversion of C3 dwellings into HMOs, provided they accord with four key principles. Principle 1 is, next slide please. Principle 1 relates to concentration. As you can see, and is stated within the report, the development is considered to be below the 10% threshold, measured at 6.66%. Principle 2 relates to facilities and amenities. For the reasons stated within the report, the proposed development is considered to provide future occupants acceptable amenity. Next one. Principle 3 relates to flood risk. As can be seen on the screen, the site is located within flood zone 1 and is therefore not liable to flooding. Principle 4 relates to highway safety and parking. As you can see on the screen, the parking within the locality is considered to be at capacity. However, in line with the HMO SPD, this is not considered detrimental if the site is considered to be in a sustainable location. A sustainable location is defined within the HMO SPD as being within 400 metres of a bus stop and 400 metres of a neighbourhood parade. The maps on the screen and the report demonstrate how the site is in accordance with these parameters. The report also goes on to address issues such as noise, disturbance and placemaking. Overall, it is considered that the proposed development is policy compliant and is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Just one. Out of curiosity, there are bus stops there. Is there an actual bus running on that route, do you know?
Yes, there is. There's got the number 1 on as the bus stop shown there, and then there's a number 2 which is on Billingbrook Road, which is further to the north.
Okay.
And then regularly,
conscious that there's plenty of places where there's bus stops, but no buses running.
Any further questions from the committee? No. Okay. We will move to the speakers in the following order. Councillor Scott Packer, local ward member.
Thank you, Chair. Committee. We are losing too many of these 5-bedroom family homes to HMOs. Falklands was specially designed to cater to a range of housing needs to offer people more space to live, and by converting these homes to HMOs, we are destabilising the local amenity. We already have 8 in the local vicinity as it is. The area in question is already poorly maintained and much social housing still remains. WNC have a duty of care to properly maintain these housing estates, but it just isn't happening. Talavera is currently second on WNC's list for fly tipping. If it wasn't for the local Falklands litter pickers removing circa 80 bags per month, littering would also be a much bigger issue than it appears. Serious weight needs to be given to resident and occupant amenity. Then there is the question of highway safety / parking. Both the police and WNC Highways have voiced concerns. I quote the police response: "There are no designated off-street parking spaces provided. On-street parking and inconsiderate parking are often cause of neighbour disputes, which our neighbourhood teams have to police. The LPA should check whether there is sufficient parking within the area to accommodate the development." And the police are recommending the local planning authority checks whether there is enough parking in the area. Have you? Then there is also WNC Highways contribution, which I again quote: "The local area is already heavily parked with minimal or no on-street parking capacity remaining. The proposed development is expected to increase parking demands, particularly during evening hours when demand is at its peak. While the adequacy of parking provision is a matter for the local planning authority, it is recommended that planning gives due consideration to whether the proposed site can accommodate any increase in parking demands resulting from the proposed change of use." And from the reports, we can clearly see these legitimate concerns have been ignored because there is a bus stop 300 metres away, a cost cutter and a fish and chip takeaway 150 metres away. Really? then there are no more parking spaces. We know this. Social media and my inbox is full of complaints about where people are parking, on paths, grass verges, in front of garages, double parking. This is not safe, especially when you consider how close to the local primary school this is. And serious weight needs to be given to highway safety in this application. It is not a question of is this development being the proverbial straw. The back has already been broken long ago. This is not a sort of amenity I'd wish to subject on anyone. We should be endeavouring to increase our residents' quality of life, not reducing it at every available opportunity. I urge you to seriously consider voting against this application on the issue stated. If committee, in the end, is minded to accept this application, and if not already done so, at the very least, can sound installation in each bedroom be conditioned to help protect both occupants and neighbour amenity from noise or disturbance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Murtry.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, is it 5 or 6 bed? Because it says 6 here, it's just, you open with 5, and that would be a bigger increase of proposed. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's fine. It does say it's a 6 bed,
yeah.
But the original housing is 5.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. I now call on John Assamaya, agent for the applicant.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Asiama. I am representing the applicant in support of this proposal. In terms of policy compliance, officers have carried out a full and detailed assessment of the application against the local plan, the HMO SPD, and the National Planning Policy Framework. Their report concludes that the proposal complies with policy and is acceptable in principle, in design quality, and in its impact on neighbors. In terms of over-concentration of HMOs, the HMO SPD allows up to 10% HMOs within a 50-meter radius. Within that area, there are 30 dwellings, only one of which is currently an HMO. Approval of this application will bring the total to just 6.6%, well below the threshold. There is therefore no risk of over-concentration or harm to community balance. In terms of standard of accommodation, all 7 bedrooms meet or exceed minimum space standards. The shared kitchen dining room provides 34 square meters, significantly above requirements and ensuring good day-to-day living conditions. The layout offers natural light, functional circulation, and appropriate ratios of bathrooms and shared facilities. In terms of external changes, the only external change is a 3-meter rear extension, which is 2.8 meters high. It is modest and sympathetic to the property, and officers confirm it causes no harm to the neighboring amenity or local character. In terms of parking, although no off-street parking is provided, the HMO SPD recognizes that in sustainable and accessible locations, lower levels of car use are expected and acceptable. The site is within easy reach of bus routes, services, and shops, reducing reliance on private cars. Therefore, the lack of on-site parking does not justify a refusal. And finally, in terms of impact on neighbors, this is a small, well-managed 7-person HMO. There is no evidence that a property of this size, which will be subject to licensing and management controls, will lead to noise or disturbance. Police and other consultees raise no objections. This proposal fully complies with the HMO SPD and wider policy, provides high-quality accommodation, results in no harm to neighbors, and is clearly supported by officers. For these reasons, we respectfully ask members to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, at this point, are there any points that the officers wish to come back on?
Yes, just in regard to the parking in particular, although it is appreciated and it is known that the parking in the area is at capacity, this was given weight. However, this was not given a sufficient weight to outweigh the formally adopted SPD, which obviously allows for or takes this into consideration, but if the location of the HMOs are within a sustainable location, this is still deemed to be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. At this point now we now move to debate the application. So who would like to go first? Councillor Ware.
It's a question rather than starting the
Okay,
debate,
no.
Chair, if I may. You mentioned that Northampton Town Council have made a late comment. Are you able to tell us what that comment is, please?
To be fair, it wasn't late. It was just because of the delay we currently have with our admin staff that it got to us late. So that's why it wasn't included in the original report. But their objection is essentially it relates to parking as well, mainly from memory, and I believe it is obviously impact on neighbour amenity due to the parking stresses and obviously the issues that come with those situations.
Okay. Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I have a question. You mentioned that the room sizes will all be adequate, but we did hear about noise. Is there a noise report from each room to room? Now it's going from a house to individual people's...
There isn't, no, but that is covered by building control with approved document E. So that is a consideration for them. Obviously, they do have to provide a suitable noise level within the room to allow the future occupants to sleep, etc., to provide them with sufficient amenity. But as a building control matter as well.
Councillor McMurtry.
Yeah, no, well, I was just going to start the debate. I didn't want to labour the point of parking, but like it is already at capacity. So I sort of wanted to give that a bit more weight because, I mean, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that people who move in aren't going to, have cars and stuff. And with Northampton's police, fire and rescue designing out crime officer raising his concerns about that as well. I think, I'm not sure. I'd like to see what other people in the room think, but I don't like that aspect of it.
Councillor Rainbird.
Just a comment on the parking again. As we can all agree, I dare say, we can all agree it's at capacity with the street photos, etc. But Highways have said it's not majorly impactful. So if we just base it off of that, then I can't agree to refuse it. Just on that grounds. Obviously, I know this is just started a debate, but I'd just like to put that out there.
Councillor Munakali.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we have, it's fortunate and people's sort of living, I guess, in regards to HMOs. But in this particular one, I mean, we are talking about the parking and stuff, and there are 7 occupants, and so how many parkings are already there? Could you confirm? Is there any car parking spaces already there, or is...
At the site, no. It's relying on communal parking areas around the estate. Which are already at capacity. Yeah. But again, there's a formally adopted HMO, formally adopted SPD. So by saying that, by going with a refusal on this, you'd be going against that SPD, that formally adopted SPD, which has been adopted by obviously the committee, obviously the policy committee. So obviously that you've got to bear that in mind as well.
Yeah.
Also, with experience, inspectors have said that in locations where parking is at stress or is at capacity, occupants move into that knowing the situation, so they're less likely to have a car. Also, when it's in that location in particular, there's an equal walking distance to access the car than there is to access the shop, and then it's not much farther to get the bus. So you've got to take into account that aspect. And that's essentially what your role is, to take into account and weigh that situation up. In my opinion, it was that I appreciate that the parking is really bad in the location, and that this has been reinforced by the police. However, I don't think it was sufficient to outweigh the HMO SPD and recent appeal decisions, which have gone the way of sustainable locations outweighing car parking.
Thank you. But for me, it was the through you, Chair, sorry. It was the how the property is and the state of it, and so I'm not speaking against it. I'm just basically pointing out my thoughts there. So for me, I mean, there is, yes, in that estate at all, there is car parking issues overall anyway. Personally, I wouldn't reject this for parking issues. That's me.
Councillor Cartwright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked through the SPD for the HMOs and the policy, and it does seem policy compliant. It's out of curiosity, it's a family home now, and do we know how many cars they've got there?
At the current moment, is it a family home?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a family home at the moment because obviously the person seeking to do this, obviously I believe it was on the market recently in July, I believe, and it's been purchased by the applicant, who's obviously got the intention of putting a HMO. So.
Yeah. Okay.
But obviously the parking, if it's a 6-bedroom dwelling, I think or even if it's a 5-bedroom dwelling, which is said, obviously the evidence in front of us is that it's a 6-bedroom dwelling. That the Rightmove advertisement was as a 6-bedroom dwelling. That would believe that the Northamptonshire County Parking Standards is 3+. Was it the parking demand would be 3+ for that? Yeah. So it'd be free essentially with one visitor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Rainbird.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump on the back of that. I mean, like you said, it's a 6-bedroom already, family home. You're already expecting a significant amount of cars with that. So with it then being changed to a 7, you're not adding any more cars potentially. You maybe adding one more, but it's already got the possibility of 6 cars, and then the possibility of one more. Would that have such an impact on the area already?
Okay, do we have any proposals? Councillor Carley?
I would like to propose to the original proposal and stick to the recommendations of the officers.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ware and Councillor Tarburn. Can you summarise?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ware's hand went up a split second before Councillor Tarburn, so that's who I will record as the seconder. But to summarise, the proposal is to accept the officer's recommendations for approval in accordance with the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can we see a show of hands in favour of the proposal?
6.
Those against?
3.
Abstentions?
2.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you. We will now move on to item 9, 9 Woodland Avenue, Northampton. I will hand over to the case officer, Dobromila Jaskulska, to begin the presentation. Okay.
Hello, I'm Dobromila Jaskulska. I'm the case officer for this application. The application site is located in established residential area approximately 40 meters north to Abington Park Conservation Area. The application is partly retrospective. Most of the proposed changes are already in place. We can see the original facade on the picture to the left, and the current front elevation is shown to the right. This application was submitted as a follow-up to enforcement investigation, as the implemented changes were not consistent with previous approval. The previously approved scheme from 2023 included grey cladding, new porch, installation of railing above the new porch to create an imitation balcony, It also included new garden wall finished in red brick and matching existing facade. It also included black railing to match the railing over the porch and a sliding gate. The proposal was approved as it would not impact the neighbors and the materials were suitable for the location. As the work started, the enforcement team became involved and the applicant was advised to submit a planning application relating to implemented changes. A non-material amendment application was submitted for the construction of a balcony. It did not include other changes to the front elevation or the garden wall. The application was refused as a proposed change from ornamental balcony to a walk-on balcony was considered too significant to qualify as non-material. This brings us to the current proposal. The applicant seeks approval for exterior alteration, including removal of the porch canopy and addition of a walk-on balcony, dark grey window frames, external insulation finished with white render and stone tile, and garden wall finished in stone tile. The application is recommended for refusal. The primary reason for refusal is that the balcony would overlook properties across the street, specifically the windows of number 8 and 10 Woodland Avenue, and to a lesser extent the front gardens of the adjacent properties number 7 and 11 Woodland Avenue. Second reason for refusal is that the design is not in keeping with the street outlook and properties' Edwardian character. The design also adversely affects setting of the Abington Park Conservation Area. As a result, the local sense of place is diminished. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies Q1, Q2, ENV6 of Northampton Local Plan Part 2, policies S10 and BN5 of West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, paragraph 131 of NPPF, and Residential Extension and Alteration Design Guide, SPD. Any questions?
Thank you. Yep. Any questions from the committee? No? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll now move to public speaking in the following order. Mick Jackson, a local resident.
Chair, committee members, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the views of the 33 households who have responded to application 4041. I'd like to thank the planning officers for a very thorough report itemising in detail exactly how the development number 9 fails to meet the design tests. My focus will be on the detrimental impact of the development on the street scene and sense of place, whilst Sarah Mardell's focus, the next speaker, will be on the very real loss of privacy and residential amenity afforded by the development. I've lived next to number 9 at 11 Woodland Avenue for 18 happy years. Woodland Avenue is a street of 100-year-old Edwardian houses with a very distinct and preserved street scene, increasingly a rarity. It is clearly very precious to its residents, over half of whom have lived on the street for more than 20 years. However, it also represents an important conduit linking people from Headlands, Abington and Phipsfield wards to nearby Abington Park. As a conclusion, the planning report says the alterations made fail to respect the established street scene, harm the local sense of place and adversely affect the setting of the Abington Park Conservation Area. This is an unusual situation in that the development in question is all but completed despite planning control identifying breaches in August and allowing 28 days for the work to revert to the original plan. This means that it's unnecessary to rely on imagination to see how the plan develops. We have cast iron evidence, as you can see in the pictures, of how it has. The Planning Office report covers well the relevant policies and it's worth reiterating some of the areas in which the development fails to fit in with the character of the street scene. The street scene is predominantly red brick and pebble dash. Number 9 is light cladding and grey-white quartz effect tiles. The street scene is red brick or stone walls. The number 9, the grey-white quartz effect tiles can be seen again on the pictures there. The street scene with every house in the street has white window frames, and the number 9 development has black window frames. The street scene has Edwardian single wood and glass front doors, as does the plan picture for 4041. The actual thing that they've built, if we could we have the picture of the latest development? That now has double black cinema type doors, which were not on the original plan. The street scene has no balconies, just the Juliet imitation balcony. The street scene has no balconies anywhere in the street. Number 9 has a proposed walk-on balcony with a glass half-height screen. Section 714 of the report summarises the impact well, and I quote, "Overall, the proposal contravenes to policies Q1 and S10 by delivering substandard and incompatible design that disrupts the historical style of the street, damaging local sense of place. Additionally, it fails to follow principles outlined."
Can you conclude your statements, please?
Additionally, it fails to follow principles outlined in Residential Extensions and Alterations Design Guide. So I appeal to you on behalf of the 63 residents on Woodland Avenue and countless regular passers-by to follow the officer's recommendation and refuse permission for the application and revert to the original plan. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? No. Thank you very much, Mick. I now call on Sarah Halls, a local resident.
Thanks. My name's Sarah. I'm a clinical psychologist in the NHS, and my family live directly opposite number 9 Woodland Avenue. The development of the property has drastically changed the outlook from the front of our family home. The street scene has always been one which consists of traditional Edwardian-style properties, which, while all being individual, have all been constructed of similar materials. The construction of a new property and any changes to existing ones have always been completed in keeping with this in order to blend in with the existing neighbourhood aesthetic. Number 9 is now very different and bears no resemblance to the original house or any of the other houses on the street, and it dominates the outlook from my family's home. My main focus here will be the proposed weight-bearing balcony to the front of number 9 at first floor level. A balcony is defined as an extension of living space, which expands a home's usable area. It can also be used as a viewing platform. The view from the proposed balcony would be directly into the 2 first floor bedrooms and into the lounge of my family's home. Indeed, anyone sitting or standing on the proposed balcony would not have a view of anything except the houses opposite and the adjoining front gardens. As stated by the officers, the presence of such a balcony would seriously impact the privacy and amenity of my family and of others. As the officers state in their planning committee report, the proposed construction of the balcony would be contrary to the requirements of the Residential Extensions and Alterations Design Guide and the Northampton Local Plan Part 2, concerning amenity and layout. It would result in an unacceptable level of overlooking. The proposed balcony extends beyond the front facade of the house, including extending further forwards than any of the windows. Additionally, as stated by the officers, it is important to note that balconies result in greater overlooking than windows at the same level, as they are intended for leisure and prolonged use. Section 7.1 of the Residential Extensions and Alterations Design Guide states that front extension should not unduly affect neighbours' amenity. Section 7.21 of the Design Guide states that balconies will only be acceptable if it can be demonstrated that they will not overlook and have detrimental impact on the privacy and amenity of neighbouring properties. Someone having a direct line of sight from a balcony into our bedrooms and family lounge would certainly affect our amenity and our privacy. Indeed, it would make our family feel very uncomfortable and unsafe in their own home. Therefore, the proposed balcony fails to meet these specific design principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
you. Okay, we now have a written statement from Councillor Cameron Emery, the local ward member, and also Joanne Bly.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 statements to read out. I'll read Councillor Emery's statement first and then Councillor Blyth's statement. So this begins the statement of Councillor Emery. I'm speaking today on behalf of a number of residents on Woodland Avenue who have raised serious and consistent concerns regarding this development and the impact it is having on both the character of the street and the amenity of the neighbouring properties. I wish to focus my comments on three core areas where this development clearly conflicts with our adopted design principles. 1. Impact on neighbour privacy and amenity. The load-bearing first floor balcony directly overlooks the bedrooms of number 8, 8A, 10 and 12 and the gardens of number 7 and 11. This is not a marginal loss of privacy, it creates a permanent elevated viewing point into the private living and sleeping space of these properties. The balcony enables people to stand and gather at first floor height, and it materially harms the amenity of neighbouring homes in direct contradiction of the design guide, which is explicit in requiring that developments must protect privacy, outlook and amenity. Importantly, no other property on Woodland Avenue has a Juliet or load-bearing balcony. This installation sets a precedent the residents did not seek and do not support. 2. Failure to respect the character and appearance of the street. Woodland Avenue is a cohesive Edwardian street. The 24 houses along the avenue were built with red brick and pebble dash, white frame windows and traditional Edwardian entrances. The development in question has replaced these defining features with light grey cladding, grey and white quartz effect tiles, dark grey window frames and a large black double front door, disproportionate in scale and of the entirely different style of the property. Additionally, a stone wall now fronts the property, a material and design not seen anywhere else on the avenue. Taken together, the introduction of these materials and features results in a dwelling that is visibly out of keeping with the established character, contrary to the principle that new development should respond positively to its surroundings. 3. Non-compliance with design principles on space and surface treatment. The distance from the building to the pavement is approximately 4 metres, falling around 30% short of the required minimum. The committee recently refused a hard-standing proposal elsewhere on Woodland Avenue on precisely this principle, and it is critical that such standards are applied consistently. Furthermore, the replacement of permeable front garden planting with hard surfaces increases surface water runoff, again counter to guidance which promotes permeable solutions to mitigate flood and drainage pressures. Members, taken individually, these issues raise concern. Taken together, they represent a development that negatively affects neighbouring amenity, fails to reflect the character of the host dwelling, fails to respect the wider street scene, and fails compliance with multiple design principles that this committee has rightly upheld elsewhere. Residents have been clear and measured in their objections. The planning policies are clear in their intent, and I therefore ask the committee to refuse this application in order to protect the amenity of neighbours and preserve the architectural integrity of Woodland Avenue. And that concludes the statement of Councillor Emery. I will now read the statement of Councillor Joanne Blythe. Chair, members of the committee, I'm speaking today to request that this planning application be refused based firmly on the material planning considerations identified by your officers. The first and most immediate concern is overlooking. The proposed walk-on balcony would introduce a significant and unacceptable loss of privacy for neighbouring residents. Its elevated position directly above the front door creates clear, prolonged views into the front gardens of number 7 and 11, as well as the windows of homes opposite. Unlike a standard first floor window, a balcony is designed for regular use. This makes the degree of overlooking far more intrusive, and it conflicts directly with policy Q2 of the local plan and the council's residential extensions and alterations design guide, both of which seek to protect neighbours' privacy or amenity. Second, the proposal would erode the Edwardian character of the host dwelling and disrupt the architectural cohesion of Woodland Avenue. The use of grey, stone effect, split-face tiles, smooth white render, dark grey window frames and the painting of traditional white timber framing in dark grey all represent a stark departure from the established materials, finishes and features that define this Edwardian streetscape. These alterations do not respond to local distinctiveness, nor do they respect the architectural integrity of the original building. This is contrary to policies Q1 and S10, as well as the design guide SPD, all of which require high quality design that reflects the character and materials of the area. This leads to the third issue, harm to the local sense of place. Woodland Avenue is notable for its consistent early 20th century architectural style, which creates a strong identity and contributes to the wider historic character of the area. The proposed works, both in materials and the modern balcony, introduce visually discordant elements that dilute this sense of place. When a single property moves so dramatically away from the established palette and form, the cumulative effect is long-term erosion of the street's distinctiveness. Finally, the scheme would adversely affect the setting of the Abington Park Conservation Area, just 45 metres away. Even though the site is outside the boundary, the continuity of Edwardian character between Woodland Avenue and the conservation area makes the boundary visually imperceptible. Policies ENV6 and BN5 make clear that development near the heritage assets must preserve or enhance their setting. Instead, the proposed works introduce incongruous materials and features that interrupt the historic streetscape and diminish the coherent transition between the conservation area and its surroundings. The harm described is precisely the type of impact that these heritage policies seek to prevent. In summary, the proposal fails on all key material planning grounds. It causes unacceptable overlooking, it undermines the Edwardian character of the property, it diminishes the local sense of place, and it harms the setting of the Abington Park Conservation Area. It is therefore in clear conflict with policies Q1, Q2 and ENV6 of the Northampton Local Plan Part 2, policies S10 and BN5 of the Joint Core Strategy, paragraph 131 of the NPPF and the Council's Residential Extensions and Alteration Design Guide, SPD. For these reasons, I respectfully urge members to support the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. That concludes the statement of Councillor Joanne Blythe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any points that the officers wish to come back on? No, none. Okay. At this point, we now move to debate. Councillor Carley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hearing everything and hearing from the officers as well, I mean, obviously overlooking a property is, you know, it's just invading your privacy, isn't it? So that is a huge factor that it's playing. With that being said, I'm happy to propose for refusal.
Okay, any seconders? Councillor Rainbird? Yep, okay. Summarise.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal as set out is to accept the officer's recommendations to refuse the application subject to the refusal reasons as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So we see a show of hands in terms of the favour of the proposal? Unanimous. Yeah, it's unanimous. That's carried then. No, there's not. If there are any issues getting out, just press the call button on the machine, and that goes through to the call centre, and they'll let you out. Okay. We now move to item 10, which is land off Catsby Road, Helidon.
Yes, because there's been other issues with evening meetings. They've been told and they're aware of when evening meetings are taking place. So any issues though, if you press the call button on the machine, that goes through to the central call centre that controls the car parks in Northampton, and they will just let you out manually if there are any problems. Shouldn't be though. I thought they had confirmed it, but just it's nice to hear from somebody else as well. It's only Aidan left. He's the case officer for this one. So, Nathan's only here to support you anyway.
Okay, we'll now move on to item 10, and I'll hand over to the case officer, Amy McDowell, to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, this application was deferred from the last committee for a site visit. that duly took place this week and was, I would like to say, very well attended. Lovely sunny day as well.
Sound surprised.
Sorry? No. It was an observation, a genuine observation. It was very well attended, so it was. Yeah, the application site, as members will recall, lies outside the village of Helidon in that location. This is a retrospective application to retain the existing building. And for those members who attended the site visit, obviously seen the site in its location. Was a previous approval on this drawing. You'll see dotted an approval for 2 buildings. In effect, this building is turned at right angles to that and now presents itself to Catesby Road. Previous discussions, this is the building in question. It's a relatively low profile building, just about 6 metres up to the ridge height, 36 metres full width and 18 metres in depth. Just going back to the original approval for the 2 buildings, they formed a rectangle that would basically be 36 metres long by 18 metres deep, and the building, as I say, that was approved was lower than that. Previous to that, there was a refusal by Daventry District Council, which had been recommended for approval by officers, and that's the building here. This was discussed at the last committee. So this elevation that you see is what would have been presented at 8 metres high and 35 metres wide and 16 metres deep. But it differs from the building, as you see, that's actually being constructed in that, although it's 36 metres wide, it's a lot lower and has a sort of broken profile in terms of the ridge roofs, etc. In terms of the proposal itself, the applicants have submitted a landscape scheme to basically wrap around the existing building in terms of hedgerows. Again, questions were asked about the landscape scheme that was approved under the previous approval. And the simple answer is that we couldn't enforce that because that scheme was never implemented. But obviously members will wish to consider that, or may wish to consider that. And that's the landscape scheme that was previously approved, which proposed clumps of trees, clusters of trees around the adjoining paddock, basically to break up views rather than to hide the buildings. Again, for those members who visited the site, that's the photographs of the buildings. They're purpose-built agricultural building to house livestock. And that's the view from Catesby Road at the vehicular access. Having been around the site again previously, although you see it the immediate landscape, in terms of impact from the adjoining village, I've struggled to find views from the public realm from the village to actually see the building. And similarly, as members will have seen, the nearest residential properties across the road, furlong, is very well screened by existing trees, etc. Again, we've also talked about the fact that this is a retrospective application, and also that there's an enforcement appeal currently lodged against an enforcement notice, which seeks to take out, it's under enforcement by taking out the middle bay. That appeal is yet to be heard. We've now received this application. We're required to determine that on its merits. Officers, having previously recommended approval for a higher building in this location, or recommending approval for the building as constructed, and subject to the conditions set out in respect of landscaping, future use, etc. Nothing further to add to the report, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a strange one, isn't it, for lots of reasons. It's a question for Eamon, if that's okay. Just over 3 years ago, Helidon Parish Council highlighted that the fact that what had been built wasn't what was given permission for. So my question is, we would not only would we have been fully within our rights, presumably, to ask that be dismantled. But we had completely valid reasons. In fact, we had reasons that had been validated by a planning committee that we know were robust because they weren't challenged at appeal. So my question is a simple one. Why didn't we, when the problem was brought to our attention by Helena Parish Council, why didn't we, A, enforce, and if they put forward an application, we could have just, your department could have just refused it under delegated powers because the reasons had been given to you at the committee meeting earlier.
Let's start at the start. Yeah, there was an application to refuse. That's the slide of currently. Oh, why is that back screen off?
It disappeared about half.
Yeah, it turned itself off. Yeah.
So that's the building that was refused permission, as I've indicated. That was recommended for approval by officers. Subsequent to that, the applicant submitted a new application for buildings that are just shown dotted. So they turned it 90 degrees and they reduced the height of it. Now, the reason for refusal was based on a lack of justification for the building, for agricultural justification for the buildings in that prominent location. So the combination of turning it 90 degrees and reducing it in height, the reason for refusal didn't specify anything about design or appearance. It talked about justification in the prominent location. The applicants, having obviously heard what committee had to say and having wanted to work with committee, turned it 90 degrees and proposed a lower building. That building was approved. So I take your point, it wasn't attested at appeal, but the committee's resolution to refuse it, contrary to officer advice, was never tested at appeal. So we don't know, and I think, again, we're talking theories. The fact remains is that the development was not implemented as per the approval, and that's why we're sitting here. An application was invited when the officers investigated. And to be brutally honest with you, the applicants did not engage with officers over a considerable period of time. I think officers were left with a decision which was to serve enforcement notice, and that was duly served, but that enforcement notice effectively sought to replicate the original approval, albeit in a slightly different location, by under-enforcing and seeking to remove that middle section. That appeal has not been heard. In the meantime, you have an application submitted to the council. That application is what we're now considering. And being the officer who recommended the larger building in this location, it won't surprise, in this position, it won't surprise you to learn that my professional opinion is that a lower building in this location is acceptable. So you as members, having visited the site, will obviously take a different view, or may take a different view, I don't know, because the debate hasn't been heard, and the speakers have yet to be addressed committee, so we'll wait and see what happens. So I suppose officers being consistent in their advice to you, the approved scheme was acceptable, the refused scheme was acceptable to officers, and the current application is acceptable to officers, having regard to the development plan policy, representations and conditions set out in the report.
Sure. My question, thank you, Chair. It's a really, really simple one. My question is simply, why didn't we enforce, and then why didn't we, if they made the application, why didn't we just refuse it under delegated powers? We could just have done that. We're fully within our rights, as far as I can tell. But if I'm wrong, then I need to know.
Well, with the greatest respect through you, Chairman, we have enforced because we served an enforcement notice due to the lack of engagement from the applicant. Having served that enforcement notice, my understanding is an application was submitted, and that's what's before you tonight. That's before you tonight because Councillor Hastie called it in. So I'd have to say to you, as officers, we were reminded to recommend it for approval. If as officers we were reminded to recommend refusal, then perhaps Councillor Hastie would have withdrawn his call in and we could have refused it. But my professional opinion hasn't changed in respect of an agricultural building in an agricultural setting for agricultural need, for you as members, you'll have to take a view and debate the application and the proposal before you.
Honestly, final question. With regards to landscaping, in your opinion, is that condition enforceable, the landscaping?
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have recommended.
Well, if it's enforceable, then why wasn't it enforced before?
Because the scheme that was approved hasn't been implemented, therefore you can't enforce a condition against a scheme that hasn't been built.
I would have thought the trees could have been built.
Trees don't tend to be built, they tend to be planted.
I mean, thank you.
Any further questions?
Again, I see your position as members. No, I'm not here to condone the actions of the applicant or the individual concerned, and their lack of engagement with the council officers is one that I regret. But ultimately, we have to take a professional judgment, irrespective of the motives or the behaviours of applicants, and we have to judge the application on its planning merits, and that's why we're here.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we will now move to speakers in the following order. Keith Smith on behalf of Helidon Parish Council.
I think we're switched on, aren't we, here?
Yep.
First, apologies for the voice. I unfortunately woke up this morning with a sore throat. Yes, I'm here to represent the views of Helidon Parish Council and particularly their planning committee. Chairman, members, thank you for the opportunity. As a village, we do recognise that we live in a predominantly agricultural environment and economy, and we are therefore supportive of the needs of that economy and generally support developments that are needed for the prosperity of our local farmers. The current retrospective application is for 3 barns constructed in a very dominant location on the brow of a hill overlooking Helidon village. A previous application for a smaller development of 2 barns and lower at this location was refused by the authority as it was considered to be too intrusive on the landscape and was in contravention of the local plan policy RA3. Following that refusal, a second application was made for a much smaller scale development, and very importantly, and I don't think those drawings were terribly accurate, it was a smaller scale development in a far less prominent position. It was actually, after negotiation with the planning department, the buildings proposed were lower down the field, so they weren't right on the brow of the hill, and much smaller in scale. That was supported by the village planning committee, and approval was granted. So that's the development that never took place but was granted. This retrospective application is materially different to that which was given consent, and it's different in location as well as angle and size. It's 30% larger than the one that was given consent. Sorry, it's 30% larger than the one that was actually refused. It would therefore seem contradictory to grant consent for a development in a location and on a scale previously refused. I can't quite see the logic of that. The reasons for that refusal remain unaltered from the date of that refusal. Nothing has changed. The policy plan is still the same policy plan that was in force then. To grant this application will incentivise unauthorised development. It creates a dangerous precedent that will encourage total disregard for the planning process. Members will know that we as a parish take our design guidance seriously. The Helidon design statement is clear about protecting rural approaches, minimising visual intrusion and ensuring that new development respects the landscape.
Can you conclude your statement,
yes.
Please?
Moreover, policy RA3 of the Daventry Local Plan Part 2 sets out strong expectations for protecting the open countryside and safeguarding the character of historic and rural settlements. This proposal conflicts with both. For this reason, the Parish Council concluded the application should be refused. Second, we asked for a condition preventing any residential development on the wider estate. Members, our comments are made constructively and our concerns are genuine. This is a sensitive site at the gateway to a conservation village, and decisions made here will have lasting consequences.
Conclude your statements, please.
For the community, both in terms of planning and for future adherence to planning policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are any questions from the committee? Councillor McMurtry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about your 30% larger comment. So, I was under the impression the footprint's the same. So is that just in height, or could you just elaborate?
No, the footprints aren't the application that was given consent or the one refused.
So the one that was given consent. Yeah.
That was for 2 barns and much lower down.
Yeah.
And they were lower in height, but there were 2 barns with a gap in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. But the overall footprint though is the same, right? It's just they filled in the centre one.
I think it was smaller.
Can we confirm? Because I think I remember Eamon saying last time that it was a similar footprint.
I don't think it was. But
you on?
Yep. I'm on, yeah. So the buildings that were approved, can you just make out that? So you see it dotted. So it's 2 buildings facing each other with a central courtyard. So the buildings were the total area covered by the rectangle created by both buildings facing, including that central courtyard, is 36 metres. That's the same as the 36 metres covered by the building. 36 length. Yeah, so from one side to the other, 36 metres. So they've turned that at right angles. So the front elevation of the proposed building is 36 metres. So if you imagine that that elevation before you, with the central element taken out, that would be approximate the 2 buildings that were approved. Reference has been made to the fact that they were lower. I think it was 5.5 metres. But in terms of their siting, as I say, one of them was further down the hill slightly, but still within that large sort of platform, that plateau, shall we say, that was created to accommodate the buildings back in the day. Again, yeah, it's, I think it was from memory, it's 18 metres, and each of those buildings, I think it was 18 metres or 16 metres. We're talking marginal, sort of marginal changes, but in officers' opinion, those marginal changes don't register in terms of the wider landscape when you compare the approval against what's now been built on site.
So a largely similar footprint, but just rotated 90 degrees.
Yeah, and the other thing, in terms of the elevation, that's the elevation of the building that was refused permission.
Yeah.
So that was 35 metres wide, and I think my glasses aren't that. I think that's 16 metres deep. But as I say, that was both a higher building, it's up to 8 metres in height, and a single profile building. But when compared with that elevation of the building as built, it's broken up and it's lower.
Yeah, and you've maintained the whole time that it's your professional opinion that this is acceptable.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Okay. As with the building, it was refused.
Thank you.
Is this a question for the speaker?
Dealing with that point, I just need this clarifying. Your 30% number, does that assume that the air between the other 2 is air? I think that's where the disconnect is, isn't it? Am I allowed to bring Eamon back into this? Because Eamon's figures have joined those 2 separate buildings up and made them as one, whereas the Helen Parish Council is regarding them as 2. Is that the difference of the figures?
Again, the image that you see there, the approval has 2 buildings with a central courtyard. The building that's being built has 2 buildings with the central courtyard covered, in effect creating 1 building. So, yeah.
Which is around the point that it's 30% bigger, that's all.
I haven't run an absolute scale rule, but looking at that, yes, the 30% difference comes from the fact that you've covered in the courtyard that exists between the two.
Okay, yeah, I'm just conscious that we've got 2 more speakers, so unless there's any more questions for this speaker. Anyone? Okay, thank you very much. Now call on Councillor Charlie Hastie, the local ward member.
Start that all over again. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Yes, I did attend the visit to the site. Thank you very much for organising that and the other members that were there. This is a sort of complex situation. If I can go back to the block plan, please, if that's possible. Because there is, I think, also, and I know we have to look at these on the merits of the actual plan that we're reviewing, but the situation is there is a history of retrospective planning on this site in terms of putting in driveways and large aggregate site as such. And from what I can understand of this coming in quite late, and I believe my combined statement was read out at the initial meeting, understanding is that the planning application was refused because it failed to meet key policy tests, often on landscapes, harm, scale, siting or impact on neighbouring properties. That original plan was refused. Subsequently, a smaller plan is approved, and then, as you can see here, it's 2 buildings. I'll come back to the angle in a second. And then, so that was approved. But the applicant then proceeds to build a structure without technically having permission to build that structure. It's bigger, it's further up the hill, it's far more intensive, I think, and it's materially different and will have, I think, a significantly greater impact on the landscape. If I may go to the photograph, you can imagine those 2 buildings and you're now going down to the road. If we could show the photograph of the 3. The one face on, if we can. And closer, if we can. Sorry. Okay, right, so imagine you're looking at that picture, that that's closer, so it's higher up on the top of the hill. It's 3 barns. That's not, in my opinion, a covering of a courtyard. That's an identical 1, 2, 3. That's not a covering. That's a building in its own right. It stands on its own. And if you imagine turning that and having 2, which was approved, you'd have a tiny facial footprint from the road. So. Basically, it's materially different, I think. Then no enforcement is done. And enforcement is, application is submitted. Subsequently, there's no communication from the applicant for a number of years. And then when enforcement is done, another planning application comes in for this to seek retrospective planning, if I'm right. So we end up with a situation where we've got this rather than 2 further back. And I think this puts us in a difficult position because you could argue that the structure already exists, harm has already been done. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that because it's a substantially different picture from the road and a substantially different development altogether. The 2 just don't equate to each other.
Can you conclude your statements, please?
Yeah. So I think, personally, it's just not... It's gaining retrospective planning on a planning application that has a history of planning applications being turned down, and it's just not what was approved at the planning application, and it's substantially different. It's as simple as that, in my opinion.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? I've got one question. I think the new application, the actual area, if it's outlined in red, do you have that one? Yeah, it's that's the one. Yep. That's it. Yeah. That's substantially larger than the one that was previously approved, which was a much smaller footprint as well. That's obviously the material difference. So I don't know if you...
I think that's a better drawing in terms of...
Yeah, which I think just outlined...
Again, through you, Chairman, yeah, that shows the relationship between the approved scheme and the current scheme. And again, I take the point, but on that, you'd still have a side-on elevation of a building. So yeah, we're all agreed it's materially different from what was approved. That's why you got a planning application before you, and that's why the enforcement officers pursued enforcement. But given that you haven't got an application before you, you're almost duty bound to consider that on its merits. And as I say, the behaviour of applicants or the motivations of applicants are really you have to set aside and judge this application on its merits. And whilst it may be different, you have to demonstrate what is the harm to the surrounding area in terms of the immediate landscape and the local landscape and the village and local residents. And as I say, officers have judged the proposal to be acceptable in those regards.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in front of us we've got a diagram of one that was approved and one that's before us tonight. There's another one, 2018. How do those diagrams compare with the one that was approved in 2018? That's planning application 0761.
Sorry, you have to give me a bit more detail on that.
The construction of agricultural building prior approval granted.
So that's a prior approval, which was further south, and that was a smaller building. It's not been implemented because they then chose to submit a building up the hill, which was then refused, and then a subsequent scheme approved. So
it was much smaller, you say?
yeah, but I don't see what the relevance that is to the current application before you. You've got to judge this application on its on its merits. I mean,
putting it in context. That's all.
Oh yeah, you're putting it in context, but you're also trying to tell a story. And I understand people's frustrations that somebody may be abusing the system or whatever. But ultimately, you have an application before you that seeks to regularise that position, and you have to set aside how the applicant may have behaved and judge this application on its planning merits.
Okay, we'll keep the questions to the speakers, obviously, because we've got one final speaker, and then we can come back and interrogate Eamon afterwards. Okay, so any further questions from the committee? No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
I will now call on Dave Collins, agent for the applicant.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Eamon said most of the what I was going to say about the application itself. The site has planning permission for the two barns that are indicated on the layout plan there. In the end, for whatever reason, the applicant decided not to build it that way. I think there was some miscommunication between the agent and his agent at the time. From my involvement in the case since the spring, the application site doesn't lie at the crest of the hill. It's slightly further down. The land rises from Catesby Road to the south, about 5 metres to the application site itself, and then continues to rise for another 7 metres on the field to the north. There are relatively glimpse views of the building along Catesby Road as you head up Casey Road to the north. There's a field access where you can see the building, and there's the field access that actually serves the barns, which is the photograph I think that you've been looking at showing the building. And that photograph also shows the landform continue to rise beyond the building as well. Functionally, the applicant decided that 3 buildings fitting in that open courtyard in the centre was, I think, always his intention to do that, whether he built the building in the position that he had it approved or where he has built it now, and carried out. In the end, the buildings are 60 by 40, three bays of 60 by 40. The central part was 60 by 40 as well, so that was filled in. And there is a permission there for 2 buildings, and it's whether this enclosed bay and the reorientation of the building causes additional harm. The previous buildings were approved within the same plan period that we're in at the moment, and it's whether any further harm you can demonstrate that further harm is caused to the appearance of the landscape as a result of the buildings being built in a different position. It's regretful for me that I'm here with a retrospective application I'm trying to justify, and I'd much rather have a proposal in front of me, but say, I think overall, if you're looking to try and demonstrate that this causes more harm than the buildings that have been previously approved, and if it had made an application to enclose that central bay in the future, whether that would have been, you'd have had sufficient justification to say no to that part of it, you're essentially dealing with two building forms that are very similar, in a similar position, and that don't cause, I don't think in itself, cause material harm to the landscape. I think the landscaping scheme is implemented, that will soften the building within the landscape. So the intention is not to enclose it. The red line around the site area is extended simply to include the small copse in that triangular section at the bottom, which will hopefully again soften the appearance of the building. I've asked the committee to hopefully judge the application on whether it causes demonstrable harm to the appearance of the landscape, rather than the fact that it's a retrospective application that we should have had planning permission with to start with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Frost.
Yeah, thank you for summarising that. Your clients already had permission to build, two planning permissions to build agricultural barns. Why wouldn't he just build those if he wanted an agricultural barn?
As I understand it, it was, to say simply, a question when they actually got to looking at the site and putting the buildings up with the engaging with the steel contractor and so on, that this position was thought to be in functionally in a better location than pushing the building back towards the head.
Sorry, I meant the first one as well. The first one was in a less prominent position, and as Eamon said, it was a bit smaller. On two occasions, he's applied for permission and then built something differently. What's going on there?
He's had permission to build one building in one place, two buildings in one position. He's reorientated that and then closed the
I'm referring to, sorry, Chair, I'm referring to the earlier one from 2018, the prior approval one.
I think the prior approval one was further, I'm not saying, I think Eamon's referred to this, it was further back into the field and further down the hill towards the village as well. I think to gain access to that and again the topography, the land does rise 5 metres between the Catesby Road and up towards the position of the site here, and I think it's just the same.
Through you, Chair, why would you apply for something that he doesn't want? That's what I'm...
I think it was a prior approval, and then the 2018 one was a discussion with the planning authority as to whether this was the correct position for it. I was a planner, local authority planner for a long time, and I've put my views forward as to where the location of buildings should be sited, but it was always in discussion with the applicants as to whether that was a viable alternative or not. I think in this case it wasn't seen to be a viable alternative.
My final question, honestly, Chair, my final question: if in the documents and reports that I've read, you've made it clear that there's no. Tonight we're going to judge this on its merits, but just to help sway the argument, if you like, would you be prepared would your client be prepared to have a condition that granted the parish council a covenant in the event of residential permission being granted, that they could only do so with the permission of the parish council?
I don't think that would be viable in any case, but I don't think there's no intention.
Hold on a second, excuse me, I'd let the legal expert speak.
Sorry to interrupt. Through you, Chair, that's not a viable condition, that's not a valid condition, that does not meet the tests, and that's outside the control of the planning authority. We're making a judgment on the buildings and the application that's before you. Thank you.
It is possible.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Ware?
Retrospective planning applications are unfortunately more prevalent than we would want them to be. But, Eamon, if I'm correct, we are to judge this retrospective planning application on its merits as per the application in front of us. It's not to be considered in any other sense other than, does this application meet the local plan, the MPPF, all of those policy things? We look at it as if it hadn't ever been built, and would we pass it? Am I correct, Eamon?
Yes.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Eamon, any points you'd wish to come back on?
Not really, Chairman. I think we've exhausted this particular path.
Okay, and yeah. Do you wish to ask any questions?
Yeah, question of Eamon. You showed the map of the village and that. Can you show me exactly on there where this barn is? Because I'm struggling with that bit. That's the one, yeah.
Yes.
Where is it?
It's basically...
Oh, Plum Barn on Stockwell.
Where's the other side where it says Plum Barn?
I could use the pointer on the computer, I would do, but that's the building.
Yeah.
That's the village. It's about 400 metres. That's the farm. Basically, there's a great big hill there, so when you're driving down Lower Catesby Road, you
Or
don't see the
biking down.
building. There's a lot of trees on the side, and yes, we're in the winter, so you do get glimpses of the building as you pass it. Once you get to this part, you're dropping down into the village. You don't see the building because there's trees there. You don't see the building because there's trees there. The land drops down there, because I've walked that, and I've walked this path. You'll see the building from a high point across there, but it looks like an agricultural building in the open countryside where you expect to see agricultural buildings.
Thank you. I know the area well. I just couldn't place where the barn was. That was all.
So, yeah.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a statement from Councillor Beryl, which I wish to read out, obviously, because he obviously couldn't make it here tonight. So, having obviously visited the site yesterday with Councillor Rainbird, he says, this application has been raised and presented to the committee and should be treated as so. The applicant hasn't followed the standard planning process, but nonetheless has made a retrospective application. The history of the applicant and the land shouldn't really come into consideration. The barn outbuilding is sympathetic to the land with a wooden slat finish and lays within the surrounds well. Its construction and appearance is exactly what you would expect to see within surrounding farming land. I'm struggling to find a material condition to refuse this application. I urge the committee to go with the officer's recommendation for approval. And that's from Councillor Beryl. So obviously I open the floor up now to debate. Councillor Ware? Sorry.
Do we need to debate this anymore? Can I go straight for a proposal? Can I make a proposal and see whether it gets seconded? Can I suggest that we accept officers' recommendations to retrospectively agree this barn?
Okay. And we've got seconded by Councillor Rainbird and McMurtry. Okay, summarise.
Thank you, Chair. So it's summarised as follows, that the application is proposed by Councillor Ware and seconded by Councillor Rainbird, I think, was first, just in that case, that the application be approved in accordance with the officer's recommendations, subject to the conditions as set out in the report to the vote, Chair.
Okay, can I see a show of hands in favour of the proposal? Those against?
1.
And abstentions?
1.
1. Okay, that's carried. Okay, so we've got 2 item 10, so I'm assuming this is item 11.
Yes, that shouldn't be there.
Okay, no, strike that then. So item 11, urgent business. And there is no urgent business, I believe. There are 9 items of urgent business. So the next meeting will be held on Thursday, the 8th of January 2026. Even though it says 2025, at the Forum in Toaster.
What changed that?
Sloppy work. Sloppy work.
Sorry, I heard it 4. It wasn't Toaster.
It's a Forum.
Oh, it's Forum. Thank you. Sorry, I heard 4. Ignore me, I'm tired.